Oh boy, that was unfortunate. Hello. If you were just in the live, I apologize. That was just technical difficulties. Okay. Hopefully this time we'll have no problems. I had to take the dog out for a walk though. She was desperate to get outside. So that's just what you have to do when you're a dog caretaker. Hey Larry, hey Justine, how y'all doing? Good morning. We were just live. I don't know if you're just coming on. We had a live going and it got kind of jammed up because I took the dog outside. So I'll be back in my place in just a second here. We'll be under much better circumstances. Okay, dog, go ahead. Go ahead. There we go. I tell you what, it is cold where I am. Very cold. No, it's not snowing here. It did snow here a couple days ago, and it's just been so cold that the snow, none of the snow has melted. I just got to take off my boots and my jacket, and then we'll be back in business. Oh boy. Yeah, but I like the cold actually. I mean, I don't like it. I like the weather in terms of it's cool and crisp. But sometimes if your hands are cold or your feet, that kind of sucks. Okay. All right. Sorry about that, folks. It's snowing there. Oh, in Nashville. Yeah, I heard about that. And Tennessee's getting a lot of snow. I heard that from Sheila. She lives down there. Thank you, Chap, for all you do. Yeah, I'm going to change my name to Chap. Actually, I like that. You're a good young chap. I'm doing okay. Thanks, Mercy. I'm up and down, up and down, up and down, like everybody else, right? But I would say this. It's weird, but like for certain days, I get crushed by this Gulf War stuff. And then other days I wake up and I can kind of do better. So I'm just, whenever I get the good days, I'm grateful for it. That's just life, right? You have to deal with the ups and downs of and everybody's got something going on, whether it's financial or emotional, relationship, physical, whatever, right? So unfortunately, and there, by the way, there are plenty of other people, including those in Gaza, obviously, they have it way worse, right? Let's be clear. So do me a favor. We had a bunch of people in here before. If you don't mind, can you tap on my forehead? Somebody's doing it to get the likes up. I don't really care about the notoriety. I just want to get more people in so we can share some good comments and get some guests back up. So yeah. And by the way, if you're new and you're like, who the hell's this guy? My name is Chip Barnes. I'm an Army veteran. Been on TikTok for about 3 months. I learned about the Israel-Palestine issue when I was 21 years old, and I'm 56. So I've learned as much as I could about it. And I don't know everything, but I do do know a good bit. And I try to advocate for people that are oppressed in general. So, of course, in this case, I advocate for Palestinians because clearly they're the oppressed, right? And I try to call out the BS. When I have conversations with people who disagree, I try to be polite. I try to listen to everything they have to say. Sometimes I have to take notes because it's so much stuff they're sharing. But I give them their time to speak. I listen. I make sure I clarify if I understand them. And then I try to rebut the points as fairly as I can without being mean about it. And I think talking past people or, calling them names or being cocky or what, it just doesn't help. No one's going to come around to a better point of view if you make them feel like shit, right? So I really try to go out of my way to be more concerned. Now there are some people who are acting like a fool, and you got to act a fool back, right? You can't let somebody run roughshod over you. But so be it. And hopefully, Riri, we can make this work a little more smoothly. I apologize for your segment. So people are still filtering in. Why don't you give it a second while people filter in, Riri?
Sure.
And if you want to chat with me, that's fine. I didn't want your issue not to get in front of as many people, so you can enjoy your conversation and reach the group. So, Riri, by the way, did you tell me that you're of Palestinian descent?
Yes, I'm Palestinian.
Okay, very good. And does your family hail from a particular part of Palestine?
So my father's side of the family is of the displaced Palestinians from Jerusalem in 1948, and
Oh,
my
wow.
mom's side of the family is from Bethlehem. And yeah, my father's family moved to Bethlehem after they were displaced, and I grew up there.
Very cool. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to remind everybody, I've been watching a person who's been very helpful to me in terms of teaching me some things. If everybody doesn't know, I've been trying to work on trading, which is obviously an extremely difficult uphill climb for even the best of people. And I've met somebody recently. His name is Valus. He has a service called Millionaire Meta Forum. And I got to say, I mean, I've watched a lot of traders over the years, but I think this person is, there's a couple that have made a ton of money that I guess are, in the Hall of Fame, but this person's on his way. I'll tell you that. He's that good. and I've been watching him for a couple weeks, and I think he's in the chat right now. I'm not saying this to butter him up too. I would say this, I would say this about whomever is that talented. So he's somebody who I want to share with the group more. I mean, I haven't actually interacted with him too much. We're getting ready to schedule some one-on-one, which is kind of like a coaching thing. And I'm hoping to take my problems in trading, which are many, and get on the right track so I can make an income. Because quite frankly, I've shared this with the group. Now that I'm doing this full time for the most part, other than some training, I've made a little money lately, but I haven't had the guts to pull the trigger on most of Velas's trades. He's got this quality about him where he's calm. He's got nerves of steel if things are going against him. I don't know. It's just an amazing quality that I don't have right now, or it's somewhere in me. I just have to work on it, right? It's like building up the calluses. So I just want to shout out to Velas. Thanks for being here, Velas. I appreciate you. And just to see somebody who's that talented at a certain trade is amazing to me. Anyway, we'll talk more about that later. I just want to give him a quick shout out. So sorry, Riri, please continue.
Oh no, no problem. I was commenting on the question related with whether we should engage in debates about the biblical arguments that the Zionists make to justify the occupation and their separate colonial project. And I was talking about how, while unfortunately this might seem like irrelevant to any logical person, yet it continues to be used as a core argument to justify the Zionist project. And that just means that we find ourselves in a position where we have to engage and just spread correct information. So, but I mainly wanted to highlight one particular Zionist tactic that has been consistently used to weaponize the biblical context, and that is the redefinition of Judaism as an ethnicity rather than a religion. And I understand that, and I respect that a lot of Jewish people, especially those in Europe, may feel like being Jewish is part of their ethnic identity because of their historical shared experiences. But at the same time, a lot of Jewish people also disagree with this definition. And the reason this is important is because it's being used by the Zionists to just justify that anyone who is Jewish and relates to Zionism might find that they have a right to go to Palestine and displace its indigenous population, regardless of their ancestry, for example. Now, the other issue is that when the Zionist ideology redefines Judaism as an ethnic identity, somehow it makes it mutually exclusive to be either Palestinian or Jewish, which serves their political agenda, of course. And it also gives equal status to anyone who is, for example, a Jewish Palestinian versus a Jewish Ukrainian or Jewish German. Like, it makes them the same in terms of their right to exist in the land of Palestine. And we need to explain or spread awareness about this. So when we learn about Palestinian history as Palestinians, I'm not sure if other people also learn about this. We learn about all of these different civilizations that have emerged or migrated. So whether they emerged in Palestine or they migrated to Palestine, we also learn about all the different languages. And we also learn about all the different religions that existed or still exist. And one of them is certainly Judaism. So to us Palestinians, Judaism is part of our history. It is a relatively recent part of the history, given that we have a very, one of the oldest locations on Earth where civilization can be tracked back to. And I keep mentioning that the oldest city on Earth that we have any evidence of is Jericho, which dates back to 11,000 years old. So while Judaism is a part of our a Palestinian history, it's not the beginning of Palestinian history, and it's not all of the Palestinian history. But we need to acknowledge this, and we unfortunately have to find ourselves having to be engaged in this discussion. And I just wanted to bring this up so that anyone who may face this type of argument, like feel confident and empowered to be able to say there is history, there are facts, and the biblical aspect, while it exists, you are taking it out of context and you are weaponizing it to serve your colonial project. That's all I wanted to say. I think you are on mute.
Yeah, sorry. There's somebody in the comments that said something named Joe Mama. So I wanted to give you a chance to respond to this if you want to, or I can do it, or we can leave it alone. Joe says, "Who cares? You lost, so you lost the land after starting the war." And I'm assuming they mean the war of 1948, when multiple Arab nations attacked after the state of Israel was formally declared and founded. I'm assuming, is that hopefully, Joe Mama, that's what you mean. Would you like to say anything in return to that?
Yeah, sure. First of all, well, I'm gonna need a few seconds to just take a deep breath, because this type of comment is usually can tell you a lot about the person who's not looking for a solution or for peace or any type of like respect to human life. Unfortunately, but again, this is spreading misinformation. There was no war, and we did not lose. If you're talking about the other countries in the region that were also defending the Palestinian right to exist, that's different. That's different because as Palestinians, also we were not allowed to have a military or even army to defend ourselves in 1948 or after that. And you also need to understand that Israel is an extension of the British colonial project. Just before Israel took over, Britain was there was the British Mandate as part of their colonial project, where they also controlled the every aspect of the Palestinian life, including the cultural colonialism, not just the military or political colonialism. And one thing that you, my friend, don't know is that while Jewish people were being persecuted in Europe, Palestine was a safe haven for Jewish people, because Jewish people, Christian people, and Muslim people have lived peacefully in the land of Palestine, relatively peacefully, for more than 1,000 years. And when people were being persecuted in Europe, they started to migrate to Palestine, some of them because it was a safe area, but also some of them because the Zionist project was taking place, and they were just unfortunately sneakily getting themselves being militarized. And what happened in 1948 was just being a traitor to the people who hosted you, who gave you safety, who gave you citizenship. So, for example, people like Golda Meir and Shimon Peres, when they moved to Palestine, they even got Palestinian citizenship. They had Palestinian passports. Anyone can look this up, can see the actual copies of the passports and their migration paperwork. And Golda Meir has a very famous interview where she says, "Before I became an Israeli, I was a Palestinian." So this was not a war. This was a sneaky settler colonial project. And we have so many examples of history of similar vicious activities towards indigenous people. So the premise of your question is incorrect to begin with, and I recommend that you read more about the history of 1948 instead of just repeating those types of statements. Chip, I think you're on mute again.
I try to go out of my way not to interrupt people, so I force myself to go on mute. Thank you for reminding me. And I forget to turn it back on. A few people in the chat I want to mention, by the way, that I'm very fond of. One is Eric Warsaw, who has a tremendous show, by the way. If you're not familiar with Eric, E-R-I-K, Warsaw, like the city in Poland. Eric hosts an evening show. It starts around 7:30 p.m. most nights. He has a great panel, and he also brings a lot of great info. But on top of that, He usually has like 500 or 600 people on there. So I'm nowhere near Eric's stature. I hope to get there. And he's been very nice in sort of helping me understand the lay of the land here on TikTok since I'm a new guy. So thank you, Eric. That's some toast I have going on. And then Tim, the handsome liberal's in the chat. I mean, it's amazing when it's almost like, you watch somebody over and over for, a long time on YouTube, and then you get to connect with somebody. It's like, this is almost like a celebrity, right? That's kind of thing. I know Tim's probably more humble about that. Tim, if you don't know, his channel on YouTube is called The Handsome Liberal, although he's definitely not that liberal in my opinion, and you can decide on the handsome part yourself when you look at him. But I will tell you this, he did a lot of content on ride sharing, and at the time I got started doing Uber, which I did for a while, which helped. It used to be okay, but it's since gotten to be a disaster for the driver pay. But a lot of stuff that Tim talked about really helped me in terms of understanding how to make the best of it. So Tim, thank you for that. And then he also hosts some political talk shows, kind of similar to what I do, but a little more around the left-right divide politics, and kind of like a traditional talk radio show. So, and all the time, it's simulcast, I think, on YouTube and here on TikTok. So if you're not following Tim, he's an interesting guy. He's a pleasant guy. I strongly recommend you follow both Tim and Eric, if you don't mind. And then they get my good stamp of approval, so to speak. And then there's also a couple people that have recently supported me. Sparkles, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. There was one other person, I'll mention your name if and when I see it. It means a lot. I mean, it's very flattering to have somebody help you out. So thank you so much. Just a FYI for Tim and anybody else, maybe Eric, and I didn't know this. If you donate through a site like TikTok, which is genuinely appreciated, TikTok's business model, they keep 70% of whatever the donations are, which, to most people seems a little high, right? But they can run their business how they choose. All respect TikTok. But I do it in my link in bio, which is a link tree. I have 5 different ways you can, help out if you so choose to do it that way. That usually works out a little better for the content creators. Venmo, Cash App, PayPal. I have a Patreon as well. So if you want to get special access to stuff, I record all these lives. Actually, TikTok records them. I then upload them to YouTube and to Rumble, Rumble's just another version of YouTube, a newer version. And I'm going to start giving those first to my Patreon members. So I'll have this app right. We finish today. Within an hour, it'll be up on the internet. In a week, it's going to go to the Patreon side, and maybe 2 days later, it'll go to the regular YouTube and stuff. So stuff like that, other private content. So if you haven't checked out my link tree, please do, because I think you'll like all the different social media and stuff like that. Let me do this. I want to bring up, thank you, Riri. I really appreciate you being here, by the way, and for sharing what you shared. I understand. And in the comments while that was going on, people were saying, nope, you don't know your history. There's a lot of argument about that, right? And let's remember that both people in all societies get stuff said to them as they grow up, school, media, culture, family, whatever. And we're all a product of that. And so our unique individuality, our own mental perceptions, plus all that stuff creates a take, I call it. And a lot of people have a different take on the same actual thing that happened. So we know in 1948, right? Hopefully you know that the Israeli state was formed in 1948. And as a product of that, people who had been living certain places were forced to go elsewhere, right? At the end of a gun. That's what happened. Now you can ascribe whatever, story you want around that, whether it was justified or not, whether who attacked whom as a part of that, and all those things. And yes, there were Arab countries that did attack when the formal declaration went through because they didn't think it was fair to the existing Arab population, which, by the way, had a vast majority population-wise up until the founding of Israel in the area. And fair enough, they had assimilated most of the European and other migrant Jewish people to the region for a number of decades. Now, it did get a little dicey as the numbers shifted dramatically towards the late 1930s, early 40s. Then it got dicey, as it would in any situation when you have tons of people flooding your area with major changes in culture and religion and ethnicity, right? It's just how people are. So let me see if Tim's in the chat still. I want to see if I can get Tim. Tim, if you don't mind, I'm going to invite you up. I want Tim to say hey to everybody because I just really like Tim, and I've never had a chance to speak to. I've tried to go on his show a few times, but you know how that goes. You're waiting in line behind 10 people or whatever. So he's invited, but okay. So let's do this. Let's go to Stace, and then if Tim comes up, I'd love to hear from him. And let me see if Eric wants to come up too.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for letting me get on your live. The reason I'm on here is because I've been silenced. I've been banned twice in 4 days. And I came across a TikTok in the wee hours a couple days ago that led me down a rabbit hole that I think everybody needs to know about. First, the TikTok was about the FIDF, which is the Friends of Liberty. And if you guys don't know what that is, go to the website. It will explain what it is. But it's basically an organization that they are a 501(c)(3) organization. And I work with nonprofit. So when I read what this company does, I thought it was suspicious. So I went down a big rabbit hole and I came across, because I wanted to see if it was legal to be a 501(c) company, or to get grants as a 501(c) and to use that to train and prop Israeli soldiers. So I found a law called the Leahy Law. And when you correlate that Leahy Law with the FIDF, it states, and I'm going to read it. And I got a video on my page, and they're shadow banning it, keeping it from being spread. But if you guys want to go to my page and look at that, you'll see a butterfly image first, because I'm trying to trick the algorithm from banning me. But
can I just? Some people may not know how to follow people on here, so can I just share with them? So if you see the box where her name is at the very first, so all you have to do is tap on the box, and her name will come up in a little box, and then you just click on the follow button, or you can go to her page from there if you want to. Please continue.
Okay, I'm going to read exactly what it is. Sorry, you got to bear with me.
I'm bearing with you.
Trying to pull it back up on my laptop.
It's okay. We can have a little dead space. It won't kill everybody, I don't think.
Okay, so I asked the specific question, can you find the Leahy Law that is being broken within the FIDF? And it states that while the precise details of specific cases are not readily available, it is important to note that the Leahy Law applies to foreign military units, not individual soldiers. Therefore, the recruitment of IDF soldiers by the Friends of IDF in the United States in itself does not inherently violate the Leahy Law. However, if specific units or individuals within the IDF have been identified as being involved in gross human rights violations, then the U.S. government could potentially be restricted in providing assistance to those units or individuals under the Leahy Law. It is the responsibility of the United States government to determine whether a particular unit or soldier violates the Leahy Law. So I just wanted your thoughts and opinions on that, because when I uploaded that yesterday, there was no warning. They banned me, completely banned me. Anything I upload now, I can't send messages to people privately. And then I heard that the Israeli cybersecurity is, working in cahoots with the big tech, and picking and choosing through the Canary app who they're going to be silencing. So I don't know how we can get this spread out, but I just think that this is a really big connection between our tax dollars and being a nonprofit agency using nonprofit dollars to train and prop Israeli soldiers I think is a huge issue. You're muted, Chip.
Sounds very disturbing and highly illegal, and I'm sorry that you're bringing that to light. Got squashed by social media. Yeah, I refer to whatever those sound. I don't have proof of what's going on there. It sounds to me like these different companies are getting pressured somehow, potentially. I don't have any documentation, but obviously the reach of certain types of content is being limited at best and sometimes eliminated at worst, including the people that work on it. So I hope that doesn't happen to you. It's happened to me 4 times since I've been started on TikTok, where I've been taken down, had to start over. So hopefully it doesn't happen again. I try to be very careful with how I tippy-toe across issues. So
right.
How about if we kind of don't say the name anymore, because sometimes the AI can trigger that stuff. Let's call it the L rule, right? We'll call it the L rule. So there's this thing called the L rule, and what she said is, she read part of it, you're not allowed to use not-for-profit dollars to fund basically an aggressive military, force that's violating human rights. And so, like anything else though, it's a law, but it has to be enforced. And the question in this case is, who's going to bring it up and who's going to enforce it? Therein lies the problem, because the power structure, let's face it, is conciliatory towards Israel on every level. And they may say things publicly, like Biden said, stop the indiscriminate dropping of you know what. But the Israelis can ignore that, right? It's just a public statement. And behind closed doors, that's where the power is. Like when they sit down to meet, he can say, listen, here's the deal. I'm drawing a line. They obviously haven't drawn that line, or we would have seen this thing end. So what are your thoughts on how it could be enforced? Any guesses?
That's why I'm here, because I just came across it. Like I was not I was not informed on this whatsoever. And to know that I'm being silenced as hard as I am tells me that there has to be some way we can use this to our advantage, or else they wouldn't be silencing me so hard.
That's a great point. So I don't know what the best way to disseminate this is. Maybe it's not on TikTok, right? Unfortunately, and we all like to kind of be here. It's fun to be on. It's easy to use, all that stuff. But I always say this all the time. I have most of my freedom on Twitter and on Rumble, and then of course on Telegram. Those are the three places where I pretty much have almost no restrictions. And then you have Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, which is a lot more difficult. It's a lot more thin ice. So rather than risk it, which doesn't make much sense, what we should do is make videos to point people somewhere where we can talk about it. You can say, hey, there's a really important issue that if we can put some pressure, we might be able to get this enforced. Come over here and we can talk details. That's the best way to do it, I think, unfortunately. And very few people actually go do it, which is the sad part. They just keep scrolling. But that's the best I got on that. I was not aware of that little part of the Leahy. I've heard of the name before, but I wasn't aware of that part of it. So thank you for bringing it to light. And maybe we can put some pressure on the elected officials by building a campaign to say, hey, you're violating your own damn law.
Right. Well, Chip, I appreciate you. I appreciate you allowing me some space to get this, get it out on the airwaves somehow. And I appreciate everybody that allowed me to speak this long and listen to me. If you want to check out the video, it's on my page. I appreciate your time, Chip, and everybody in that listening. Thank you so much.
Let me follow you real quickly because I didn't do that yet. I want to make sure I'm following you. Yep, gotcha. Okay, great. I'll take a look.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Stace. Appreciate that.
Bye-bye.
This is the beauty of the internet, right? And having these kind of conversations is, we can only cover so much terrain with our own two eyeballs, right? And other people see stuff and share it. And this is what it's all about, right? In terms of organizing. So I will figure out like what the angle needs to be, at least from my perspective. And then I'll try to share it back out in a way that, doesn't get us in any bad graces, but we can still have some efficacy, because that's the point, right? So, yeah. So I don't know. I invited Tim and Eric up. They're both busy guys, so I'm sure they don't have time to be shucking and jiving on a live like this. But again, I'll just mention their names again to those of you who aren't following them. I really like to promote other good people, whether it's TikTok or wherever. On my Twitter page, I have a link at the very top. It's just my name, Chip Barnes. It's got a lot of people that I've followed over the years. I got to add Eric and Tim to the list because most people I've done are mostly really hardcore political people. And I wouldn't call these guys, like, they're not like in those type of spaces. They do different stuff, but they deserve to be on the list. They're good people. So Eric Warsaw, Eric with a K, Warsaw. He's got a great nightly show, lots of great guests, lots of good conversations, sometimes pretty heated, which is fun. But they do polls, and Eric brings up information, newsworthy, just good stuff. So I pop in there here and there, and Eric's kind enough to give me a chance to talk, and it's fun. And then the other person I follow is SoCal Smitty. If you haven't heard of SoCal Smitty, he's got a great live as well. And they've all been very kind to let me come on when I come on and say a few things, which I really appreciate. And but they're busy, right? They have a lot of, like, sometimes Smitty has 13 or 14 people waiting to come in, which is, just a testament to how well he does. And then, of course, there's Tim, the handsome liberal. And if you haven't followed Tim, he does a live cast covering what I call retail politics, like people who call in that support Trump. They talk about issues of the day, more of the standard political stuff you'd see on MSNBC or Fox, but Tim has a nice, unique take, and he does a good job sharing his own views as well as engaging with callers and stuff. So I'm a big fan of Tim's, and maybe one day I'll get to be a guest on his. I've sat in the queue a couple times, but couldn't stay too long. So anyway, the other reason I like Tim, if you're an Uber person, like I was for a while, his videos, he has a lot of ride share. He's like, hey, it's your boy Tim with another ride sharing video. I got it memorized, right? You hear from him so often. So anyway, good Uber stuff. So if you're an Uber driver, if you're unlucky enough to be doing that, because I did it for about a year and it worked out okay. And then they changed the system that wouldn't allow me to do my little trick I'd worked out there. So unfortunately, I was getting away with some good money for a while there, but no longer. Okay, we have Sammy coming back in. Sammy, what's up?
Bringing me up again, Chip. I wasn't sure if you heard my discussion or not. Were you able to hear me? I realized that people in the chat said they weren't able to hear me. Were you able to hear me when I had that statement with you?
Tell me again what you said so I can just trigger my memory. I'm
Okay,
pretty
I'll
sure.
try to start all over again here, and I'll try to keep it a little
Well, just
briefer
give me
here.
the one or two words. I'll tell you if I heard it or not.
I was speaking about earlier when people were mentioning about a two-state solution, one-state solution, and how
Yeah.
I said that, okay, well, obviously a two-state solution did
Yeah.
not work. They built the walls around the Palestinian,
Yeah,
and
we heard you say all that. Yeah.
okay, yeah, and how that wasn't successful. It just put the Palestinians on an island per se, and that's why October 7th was the message in the bottle to the world about the situation and oppressions that they were going through, and that a one state solution, I don't believe that the trust would ever really. I don't see the trust being there. It's like sleeping with the enemy at this point. There's no trust in between the two at all. If anything, it'll have to be where the Zionist Party of Israel will need to step down. And I don't believe it's the U.S. that needs to change our government here, but yet change some rules as far as in elections, not allowing lobbyists to be involved, and which is I know is that's a really tough request, right? Because money talks. But obviously, it's the lobbyists that are controlling who's in power, and they're not just here in the U.S. but around the world. So I was talking on that part of things there. But yeah, that's just the whole recap of what I was saying, and I didn't hear your response or what your thoughts were on that.
Well, I agree 100%. I think that if you look at the history of this, the Israeli government has made it clear through their actions, not through their words, that they're not going to be willing to make a reasonable offer to Palestinians for peace. They claim they do, and they tell their population they've offered them 4 or 5 opportunities, and then every time they turn it down because these people just don't want peace, right? That's the party line. Completely untrue. Any reasonable scholar that studies it and looks at the terms of the deal, none of the deals were ever free from Israeli control. The one-state solution is untenable from the Israeli point of view because it would immediately it would create an Arab majority in the democracy, and therefore they'd completely lose control of the state, which is not something they're going to do. And the two-state solution, because the territory in the West Bank has been so fragmented, it's turned into what's called Bantustans, these little pockets of Palestinian villages and small cities, and it's all occupied. And it's just a mess. It's all fragmented. There's not really a good enough contiguous territory to create like a formal state. So therefore, it's untenable as well. And they're not going to remove, most likely, 700 plus thousand, people who live in these settlements, most of whom come from Europe or the United States. So think about it. It's just what's the likelihood, especially given the dynamic where they're being supported in everything they're doing, including this horrendous campaign in Gaza right now. But if you don't know, for the last, since 1967, there's been complete support from the United States for everything Israel's done. And our media has provided very convenient ways of phrasing things that it didn't show the world what's going on. And the only good thing to come out of this right now, in my opinion, is the fact that there's more eyeballs on this than ever before in the first place. And secondly, people are seeing through the Israeli and American narratives because they're seeing what's happening on the ground through social media, whereas before they only got the TV version, which was very sanitized. You agree with that? Sammy, you agree?
I'm sorry. I actually missed the last about 30 seconds of the comment there. I apologize.
That's okay. We can move on. So, is there anything else you wanted to mention?
No, basically, not at this point at this moment, but I just wanted to comment on what was said earlier about, and I hear this often about a 2-state, 1 state, and how October 7th was the message in the bottle to the world to get out of that, island, with the walls there. Yeah. And I appreciate what I did catch from you there on your response, Chip, and I appreciate your live a lot.
Thank you.
And I'll see you again sometime. Thank you, Chip.
I look forward to it. Thanks for being here. Yeah, another person in the chat I forgot to mention because I just saw him. If you're not following Nader Who, Nader Who, he actually was at the pro-Palestinian March for Gaza this past Saturday in D.C. Unfortunately, we tried to link up, but the signal was poor, and he was doing some work. He works in the media space where he was doing some filming of the event. So Hey, work comes first, right? You got to get that paycheck. I understand that. So if you can look for Nader Who, if he comes up, I can let you see. But if you look him up, he's a good person to follow too. Very interesting person, very intelligent, speaks very coherently about these issues, and just an all around nice person. So please give him a follow. All right, we had somebody else in the queue. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Next person is it spelled Kublai Khan? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, just say it like Kublai Khan with an H.
Okay, Kublai Khan. Gotcha. Welcome.
No, with an H, Kublai.
Right.
I just wanted to back up some of this history, very good history background you just got from one of your previous callers. Sometimes it's really important in conflicts like this to quickly and efficiently slap down bogus history claims so that they do not occupy a lot of airtime and do not crowd out people with lived experience and with understanding of international law. It is part of the structure and the process of what the Israelis call Hasbara to crowd chats like this with basically already settled historical factual issues. And so it's really important for everybody to learn how to slap them down quickly and move on. And two of those points that were raised, one is this Jericho issue. I find the most efficient way to deal with that, Jews are the indigenous people claim, or the claim that somehow the adoption of Islam or the movement of Arabs has somehow invaded the region to which Jews are indigenous. It's pure nonsense. And the DNA evidence is very clear that the Palestinian people, on average, are by far the closest relatives of the builders of Jericho, who built that city 10,000 years ago, and whose people that archaeologists call the Natufian people, Natufian, the Natufians were there 15,000 years ago in the Stone Age. 10,000 years ago, they built the world's first city and farming community. And Palestinians have 30% of their DNA in common with those people. It's extraordinarily high. Geneticists will tell you that they're the definition of an indigenous people. You wouldn't find that percentage in, say, amongst the Sioux or the Hopi necessarily of 30%. So you pretty much have to dismiss those claims of indigeneity with, the Jericho builders or 30% Natufian, and send them there. Geneticists also call that DNA Levantine. So those are the two terms. Natufian is the archaeologist term. Levantine is the DNA term, and
Yeah,
both of them back very strongly the indigeneity claim. Now, not to say that people should
Can you
run
just,
around all over the
sorry,
planet.
can you just tell people what the Sioux and Hopi were? Because many people don't know what they mean.
Yeah, they're indigenous peoples of the United States.
Of North America, yeah.
Yeah, and the Sioux were moved there from lands further east, and they adopted a horse-based lifestyle when horses were available, and they changed their location, they changed their lifestyle, but they were fundamentally an indigenous people. And in that process of being moved around, you do end up with considerable DNA mixing, and nobody doubts that. Now, I don't want to make any kind of assertion that a blood quantum, as it's called, should be the hard test of what is an indigenous person. There's a lot of problems with that. I'm just saying that when a Jewish person raises indigeneity as their basis of claim, you
Right.
must respond that the Palestinians are more indigenous. Throw them at the DNA evidence about the Natufian archaeology, the city of Jericho, the Levantine DNA, and just treat it like a settled question, because they will take over the chat with that claim if they can. The other critical historical issue that people often raise is, we conquered the land in 1948, and that can sometimes also require some specific history knowledge to knock over. The fact is that since World War II, in the UN era, basically, we've absolutely abolished the law of conquest. You cannot invade a land and claim it by conquest. In all the international law of 1945 to 1948, before Israel is founded, you cannot conquer land and make it yours. Now, that was not true prior to 1945, but if we look at who the last people to conquer the land were, technically it's Arab troops under the command of British officers with supply lines, and a Jewish spy network was involved, but no Jewish soldiers in the conquest from the Ottomans of the area in 1915 to 17. So if they raise that law of conquest, the best answer is simply to say, well, the Arabs conquered it in 1915-17, took lives losing it, when there was still a law of conquest. So your own argument actually says that it should all belong to the Arabs and they should dispose of it. So it's again, not something you should be trying to claim today, but if they raise it as an historical argument, you should be able to dismiss it with those facts. In 1948, the Nakba was already going on. There was already ethnic cleansing happening for many months, and the Arab states were not prepared for war. They didn't want war, but they were faced with this refugee crisis and they responded by attacking, and they lost a war they were ill prepared for, which is not much of a surprise. And when someone tries to claim that that somehow entitles them to the river to sea claim, again, they're wrong, because the 1948 war did not take the entire river to sea mandate of Palestine. It set a different border than Israel had been agreed to, but it didn't conquer that far. The border we refer to today is almost always the 1967 border when we talk about two-state solutions, because by then Israel had absorbed a lot of Jews from Arab states that by various means had been maneuvered to be forced into Israel. A lot of Mossad activity created that. And so they had actually more people to accommodate, and there had been also a movement on the Palestinian side. And after 1967, Egypt, which had been administering Gaza, Jordan, which had been administering the West Bank, both stood back from the Palestine situation. And so the 1967 border is the one we refer to in international law. It's the one we refer to in UN agreements, whatever. So anyone trying to claim a different border should apply because of winning in a war is full of it. And if law of conquest meant anything at all, then it means the entitlement to the Arabs because of the win in World War I. So those are two really important history points. A third thing that's kind of for the advocates.
Can you hold on for one second? Two things real quickly. So there's somebody who came into the chat as you were giving some of the stats who wanted just to add a quick bit of statistics. I'm not sure he's going to refute maybe additional stats. And there is someone in the chat that I wanted to share with you named Just for Entertainment. I wanted to see if you want to respond to this. No, you don't have to. It says, this guy really got his history mix up. Meaning I think he doesn't think you're accurately depicting what happened. So I don't know if someone is supporting the Israeli narrative. I'm guessing that's what it is. Let this one person come up, Dr. Mito, and then after that you can answer the question or continue on.
Sure.
Yes, thank you very much, Chip. And sorry to jump in, Hablai. Your talk is amazing. You're talking very, very well historical thing. I just wanted to comment about the DNA thing because there is a study in Johns Hopkins, genetic study, is released in September 22. And people are, it's good if you search it, that says that 97.5% of Judaics living in Israel have absolutely no ancient Hebrew DNA and therefore are not Semites and have no ancient blood ties to the land of Palestine at all. Whereas 80% of Palestinians carry ancient Hebrew DNA and thus are real Semites. 97% of Zionists or Jews living in Israel have no ancient Hebrew ties at all and thus are not deemed Semites, while 80% of Palestinians have, this is a genetic study in Johns Hopkins, and while 80% of Palestinians carry ancient Hebrew DNA and are real Semites. So even that lie around the anti-Semitism, the Israelis are not even Semites. Thank you.
I'm going to pretty strongly disagree with those terms of reference. Semitic is actually a term describing languages, and if you start to use it to describe races, you are automatically off the cliff. The term Levantine is the term used for DNA, and the term for archaeological findings is Natufian. And so if you start talking about Semitic or Hebrew anything, you are off in Bible land and nowhere near science at all. So I haven't read this study, and I'll look at it, and I do agree that the Palestinian population has more people descended from the Hebrew era, let's call it, than the Ashkenazim who come from Europe. However, those numbers seem to me to be looking at a very arbitrary and limited point in history. I'm talking about the 15,000 to 10,000 years ago population that built Jericho, the actually indigenous people. The Hebrew era is, how long is it? It's like really they're only in control of a small area around Jerusalem from let's say clearly from about 600 to about Alexander the Great, so like 300 years. And the only reliable history we have of that is from Josiah, who probably glosses over and messes up and fakes a lot of the stories about David and Solomon and Moses. Like, there's very good reason to believe that's archaeologically unfounded. So to say Hebrew in a genetic sense is just wrong. It's a historical term, and it may derive or may not from the term Habiru, meaning mercenary, bandit, or nomad, which describes a social class and not a group of people. So I just wouldn't cite that study.
I'm sorry to
of yours.
jump in. Can we listen? You're obviously somebody who has a tremendous amount of knowledge about the backstory and the history and all the terminology. But in terms of right now, the platform for that, what I'd like to do, if you don't mind, if you could message me or email me, I'll follow you right now. And let's set up a time to do a more in-depth discussion, maybe with somebody from the other side. It'll be an interesting back and forth.
Well, we'll do, except I just wanted to sort of dispose of this by citing sources. The source for that I'd recommend for actually understanding where the European Jewish population that becomes the Ashkenazim come from is historically, I'd look at Sam Aronow, whose YouTube videos on this are of astonishing depth.
How do you spell his last name?
I believe it's Aranow.
Aronow, like Aronow.
Yeah, Aronow. It's
Got it.
really fantastic historicals about this. So comments like 97% European, it's like the European population includes things like Muslim Spain and and Italy and Sicily and places that had historically great interconnection with the Muslim world. And so that's a dubious term in itself. I'd recommend Sam Aronow to understand where those people came from. In terms of indigeneity,
Let's
I put them like
I-
sixth on the list, but not.
Hold up. I don't mean to stop you. We've gone in for like 5 or 6 minutes, which is usually more than I give anybody. So I love your information. Like I said, in a longer form, we can go deeper as we're going. You've covered some of the key points. So with respect, I'm going to let someone else take a turn. And if you want to contact me, we'll set up a forum to go more in depth, which I think people will really enjoy. Sorry about cutting you off there, but I got to keep moving on. Thank you for being here, though. Awesome stuff. Yeah, a lot of people are saying they really enjoyed that part of the conversation. And like I said, I try to be egalitarian as best I can. If we're really on something that if we're hot back, usually if you get an argument between two people, it can be fun to listen to it. Thank you for that information. That was great. Okay, Woke, it's your turn if you want to go.
How are you? I'm one of the people that actually caught the very first account that you got like banned and you didn't know what happened. Like, you were new on TikTok. That was really funny. And
Yeah.
like to how we all, I'm the one who actually started to learn after October 7, but now we like building a community, learning about each other, getting to know. And want to say Nader, who, if he's still here, he's a wonderful therapist. I would say he has a wonderful voice. He treats people like the way he handles debates and zombies and discussions is just it's such a wise grace. And Eric Warsaw also, I commend everybody the life. But what I want to tell you, if there is the SAC lady who was talking about this legal issue, if you are still here, I messaged you, I followed you. I want to get in contact on the other platform so we can maybe brainstorm ways to tackle this problem, because I've learned about some legal resources that are available for Palestinian people, but we have to get on it. So if you are action oriented like I am, I'd love to connect with you. What I would like to advertise here today with you is, I don't know if you don't know the name Steve Sosibi. He was one of the very first people who established non-profit foundation for Palestinian. His Palestinian Children Relief Fund, established 1991. Right now, he's starting a new branch, kind of it. It's called, if you could go on the website, Heal Palestine. When you drop me, I'll put in the chat. If you miss it, I have it temporary on my profile, healpalestine.org. And he is calling for a first meeting, like a town hall meeting on Sunday, the day we supposed to solidarize on Eastern U.S. Eastern Standard Time would be 12 p.m. If you'd go on the website and register, he's collecting people who are willing to help in any way, shape, or form. Meaning, if you can donate, great. If you can, with your resources, with your time, be support. He will try to organize. This is like a long-term help for people who will need our help for years and years to come, who suffer. Like, for example, he will try to get people, children and adults to come, those who lost their limbs, to come to US for operations and then go back home. So this is to collect, to gather people for, as I said, who are committed to the help for years to come with any way you can, and it's expertise you have. So, and I will, if you don't mind, I'll come up in the evening if you live, or tomorrow, because the meeting is on Sunday, and I'd really like as many people as possible to hear. HealPalestine.org. And
Well, I'll tell you, if you direct message me and you send me, I'll do a video about it and then talk
oh,
about it in the next live too.
all right, I'll send you a message. Thank you, Chip. I appreciate it. So
Yeah.
this way we can do it. And I also think, because he's been, I got to know him through Mo Pesci live, and Mo says every Palestinian knows him. His guy's been there since 1991. The foundation is established since 1991. So he's been a long time. So he's resourceful and he knows stuff. And I'm sure he's already, connected to. That's why it's good to back him up. I'll send you the message. And I want one take on you, another opinion. As I'm finding out things right now, I'm binge watching Lawrence Wilkerson, and he mentioned a book.
Can you just tell people who he is? Because he served with Colin Powell in the Bush administration, right?
Yeah, you can tell if you can tell. I can tell you, I caught him just one short comment. He's very knowledgeable, but sometimes very knowledgeable people can be like very too sure. He made some comments about Polish politics that showed total ignorance on that. So don't listen to him on Polish comments on current affairs in Poland. But other than that, it's really good to listen to him. But I want to take on you. He announced that a friend of his, which also you tell who that is. Your English is better. You know better the vocabulary to explain who is he and who was Dennis Fritz. And Dennis Fritz is coming out with the book Deadly Betrayal about the Iraqi war. I'm just want to, because you know those guys better than me. You've been here. And what is your take on it? He's supposed to spill the beans about the Iraqi war, how that came about. What to expect from him and his book, you think?
Can you say Dennis's last name again? I'm not sure I understood the name you said.
Dennis Fritz.
Dennis Fritz. Okay,
Yeah.
I've not heard of Dennis. Maybe I should have. I know who Larry Wilkinson is. He was the deputy chief of staff to Colin Powell, who was the Secretary of Defense in the George Bush administration. And if you don't remember, when they went to get approval from the UN for this authorization to use military force in the second Iraq War, 2003, Colin Powell gave this big presentation with all these mobile weapons labs that were supposed to be chemical weapons. It was a total ruse. There was nothing truthful about it. I remember watching it live, just shaking my head like, how did they get this guy to do it? Because Colin Powell wasn't a bad guy, but he was forced by Dick Cheney, who was the vice president, to put out this rubbish in front of the UN to try to gather support for this illegal occupation and invasion of Iraq, to depose Saddam Hussein and to allow Western multinational oil companies to come in and exploit what was state-run oil companies. So it's just more of the same Western imperialism, resources, that kind of stuff. Anyway, that's what happened in Iraq, and that whole buildup was just a big story to convince the public that they had to do it, which of course turned out to be not true.
Right, and I think what you're saying is Lawrence Wilkerson was saying that under Bush administration was his worst time in his life, and he was talking about some approvals to torture military personnel, stuff like that. Which as I said, I'm just learning. I'm not there yet with the governmental vocabulary, but I am going to send you the name of the book and the guy. And I will appreciate it, but I'm gonna, hold you to it. I'd like to know your intake on it. But when you talk about it, send me your live or something. I want to hear you. I don't want you to talk and I'm not there. I just want to know your take and what to expect. The book's supposed to come out in March of this year. So, and that's it from me for now. Thank you, Chip. I appreciate you.
Okay, well, I like being held accountable, so thank you for that. And I did follow you, so let me make sure I do before you go. Let me make sure I get you followed.
I think you did because we in the other group together, around with Eric.
We'll follow each other. So yeah, message me and we'll take it from there. But yeah, I like being held accountable. Good for you. I like that. That's good stuff. Man, woman of action, man of action. I like the way she says that. Good stuff. Yeah, the U.S. has a track record, as does Israel, of having this whole system of saying one thing to the public. It's called propaganda, let's face it. And then, of course, having ulterior motives to some extent. Sometimes they're talked about during the propaganda, and many times they're found out by everybody after the fact, which is unfortunate because you get people all fired up, just like we saw on the 7th. I mean, let's face it, there were aspects to the way it was reported on the 7th that fired a lot of people up, right? Especially people who are pro-Israel. 40 babies, right? Good example. Burning, all these other things that were inflammatory. It's called atrocity propaganda for a reason. And we're still learning more and more. We don't even know on 10/7 how many people accurately and who was soldiers, who were reserve soldiers, and who are the people that actually the H group may have engaged with versus the response by the Israeli military under their, that Hannibal directive that they use. So who knows, right? But there's a lot of evidence that's been coming in bit by bit. And they have other claims they've claimed about graping and mutilation and all this. And some of it may be true. I have no reason to doubt it. But the past behavior, being that it was obfuscated and lied about on other things, gives you pause, right? Fair enough, we would put it. I think if they had the evidence of those things, they could block out the faces and they could show the actions happening, maybe mute the sound or whatever, to show that it's true. And so far that hasn't happened. They claim they've shown it to others behind closed doors, but take that with a grain of salt. I've done videos about the Israeli government and officials, and my experience has been that they are, and this is the kindest way to say it, less than truthful. Okay? We have Poison coming on, I think. Poison, I hope you're not going to kill me. What would you like to say today?
Hello, sir. How are you? Good evening, good afternoon, everybody in the room who are participating from different part of the world. I would like to highlight one point only, that the route we are not going. I can see on all TikTok lives and everywhere, nobody addressing the root cause of the problem. The both parties, the Palestinians and Israelis, both of them wittingly or unwittingly avoiding the main cause of the problem. Because if they address the main cause, both parties will be proved as wrong. Not one party is right and the other party is wrong. Both parties are wrong in this conflict. And the root cause of this problem started in 1907 when Britain invaded this territory of Ottoman Empire. And then Britain and France and Italy and Russia, they planned to divide the Ottoman Empire in order to not let the Muslims get united, because they think if Muslims stay united as a one country, then this will endanger in future, this will endanger their own existence as a European power. This is why they created this divisive border that is now known as Palestinian state or Israeli state, if you would like to say, or whatever name you want to name it. So this border, that the Palestinian nationalism that is based on this border, it was created by Zionist British French government. So now the Palestinians, knowingly or unknowingly, they are basically serving the agenda of their enemies by adhering the nationalism of Palestinianism. There was no Palestine like 100 years ago or 200 years ago. It was Ottoman Empire. It was one country. There was no border between Saudi Arabia and Iraq and Libya and Egypt, etc. They all were one country. And Britain and France, after defeat from the First World War and in Second World War, they planned to divide these people. So my bottom line is that if we do not address the root cause, and if we do not abolish this divisive border between Jordan and Lebanon and Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Iraq, then this sufferance and this persecution of these people who label themselves as Palestinians this will continue forever. It will never stop, because technically it is impossible to defeat Israel, which is backed by NATO forces like Australia and Canada and America and France and Germany, etc. It is technically impossible for a small population like Palestine. You know what is if you compare, like, is Palestine against NATO, it is technically beyond your wildest imagination to liberate Palestine. So as long as these Palestinians are actually deceiving themselves by adhering this fake sense of patriotism.
Okay, hold on one sec. You've brought up a lot of points. So give me a second to kind of elaborate or kind of come back with a couple of rebuttals, and then I'll let you take it from there. I saw a lot of people in the comments saying that, claiming that there's no quote unquote Palestine. Let me explain to you my understanding, and if it's wrong, you can correct me, okay? Going back to the Roman days, when the Roman Empire was in place, when they referred to the region that they had conquered, they called it Palestine. I don't know the exact, Latin derivation of it. Some people probably know that, especially that person that was on earlier. So I don't believe it's the case that there's never been a place called Palestine. It's a region, right? It's not a nation state. Now, one thing somebody in the chat said, yeah, that's right, there was no Palestine. Okay, I want you to go to YouTube, for those of you who doubt that, if you do. And somebody in the history of Israel, who was one of the prime minister of Israel, actually acknowledged it and claimed they were a Palestinian and that they carried a Palestinian passport. Yeah, it's Golda Meir. So let me say that out loud. So if you go to YouTube and you type in Golda Meir, M-E-I-R, I'm a Palestinian, and you'll see an interview that she conducted shortly before she died with a British interviewer, where he was trying to say, basically, you're not from Palestine, are you? She's like, no. The territory from where the 1948 borders were into the East Bank, not the West Bank, the East Bank of the Jordan River, was Palestine. I lived in Palestine. I'm a Palestinian. From 1921 to 1948, I carried a Palestinian passport. I'm a Palestinian. Now, I just told you the video. You don't have to watch it, but that's what she says. So check it out. I'm not trying to make stuff up. So if the prime minister from Israel says that she was a Palestinian, even though it wasn't a nation state, it had administrative controls, it had passport authority, it had different administrative functions that were considered similar to the functioning of a nation state. Okay, for those of you who put that down. Now, getting back to one of your questions about that, I don't disagree with you that the way that the imperial powers delineated the boundaries of the region, which is called the Sykes-Picot Agreement. If you don't know what that is, you can look that up. Sykes-Picot Agreement. It was very unfair and intentioned, in my opinion, and those who study it, to create division and strife such that, as the person said quite accurately, that people could not band together and resist the imperial powers. That's why it was drawn the way it was, and it's worked wonderfully. Look at all the conflict that's happened ever since. There's never been a lengthy period of peace in the, quote, Middle East, right? So as long as the imperial powers have these structures. Now, I disagree with the idea that you're just going to vanish all the borders and things are going to work out great. I mean, you're going to have major conflict. But the borders could be redrawn, especially in places like Iraq, to reflect the difference between the Sunni, the Shia, and the Kurds, which are completely different people and occupy the same nation state, which makes no sense. So a lot like what happened in Yugoslavia in the mid-90s, when they had the war, in terms of, the Bosnians and the Serbs, that territory got broken up into many smaller enclaves that were more tribe and ethnically religious specific, which is how things should be, in my view. What do you think about that?
This Sykes-Picot conspiracy to divide the Muslim world, they planned this in 1915. After their invasion in 1907, they planned this in 1915, and they officiated in 1916, and they implemented it in 1922. So after 1922, the Palestinian Mandate was established, and this is how you just said that the prime minister or a minister of Israel who said that she was holding a Palestinian passport. So this Palestinian passport was introduced to her by the British, because British wanted to establish the state of Israel eventually. This is why at the first step of establishing the state of Israel is what was part of this plan was, at first stage, they will establish a temporary state, which is called the Palestinian state, and then eventually they will convert it to Israel. And was a secret agreement between the Arab government in Saudi Arabia, who is known as, this Shah Hashim or something, in the ruler of Hijaz, past the ancient, Saudi Arabia. His name probably was Hashim or something, the ruler of Hijaz. So they agreed, the Arab nationalists, the Britain said to the Arab nationalist movement, then we will recognize you as independent states. In exchange, you cooperate with us to topple the Ottoman Empire. And this is the history everybody know, and you know the history better than me. So I'm not here to give the history. Everybody knows the history, what actually happened. So everybody here, the educated people, they know the secrets and they know the conspiracies, but nobody addressing the conspiracy. Now the Palestinians, they are deceiving themselves by adhering this border and this nationhood that was imposed on them by their enemies. So they are serving their enemies, and they are causing the death of their children by adhering the Zionist, border.
Hold on. Hold a second. So your statement depends on the fact that they have an ability to change what you just described. So for example, you're saying that they're fooling themselves, that they're accepting the reality of those borders. The problem is that those borders were imposed upon them violently and have been ever since by the maintenance of them. You're correct to point out that the backing of the US/NATO alliance makes it that much more difficult. But to fault them, sounds like you're saying that they need to kind of change their thinking, how would you have them go about that? They're already members of the H group, both in 1988 and in the revised 2017 charter, that don't recognize the formal borders officially, nor did the PLO. Therefore, they're maintaining the mindset, but the problem is, and I don't know how you get past this, is that those borders are being enforced by the largest militaries in the world and backed up by the largest military alliance in the world. How would you have them do it differently?
Yes, I understand. So this is the root cause. This border was imposed by America and Britain and France. So these Palestinian people should first, because they are victims and their children are unaliving. So they should stop deceiving their own children by labeling them with Palestinianism. They should now say the voice that we have been deceived and we are worshiping and sanctifying this border, and now we should stop sanctifying and worshiping this border, and we should at least campaign for the unification for the revival and for the unification of the Ottoman Empire, or you can call it Islamic State.
I got your point. Okay, let me take it from there. Thanks for being on here. I disagree with you, not because I don't think you're wrong in spirit, but I think in terms you're making the claim that people are erroneously viewing it from a poor perspective, and they need to reject the perspective. A lot of people feel that way. When people say, by the way, that indicates exactly what you're suggesting, from the river to the sea, that's expressing the very negation of the original borders of the establishment of what was a British/French/US mandate on Palestine. So I don't know where you're getting that from, that you're sort of taking this angle that you're saying they need to think of it differently, because most do think of it differently already. Now, in terms of the reality of that concept, I don't believe it's realistic, and even the H Group's 2017 revised charter reflects the realities on the ground of not being able to overcome the very obstacles you referred to, and therefore their only chance for autonomy and peace is most likely going to be a separate state established based on the pre-1967 borders. So Israel would withdraw from the occupied West Bank, and of course they'd withdraw from East Jerusalem, and they would withdraw anything as far as the border, the blockade and siege of Gaza. And then there'd have to be mutually assured peace, security agreements, maybe monitored by third parties, UN, whatever. That's the idea. But the problem is, in practice, because of the impractical nature of having 700,000 plus settlers and settlements that have totally fragmented the landscape of the West Bank, it makes it impractical for the Israelis to implement that, even if they wanted to. The political storm that would cause. Now, if you have 50,000 people, that's different. You can dismantle that with relative, in some calm. But 700,000, that's a substantial percentage of the Israeli population. It'd be very hard to do that. It'd have to be done through force. It's just not going to happen, let's face it. So I don't know how you expect somebody to aspire to something differently. They're already aspiring to it, but the reality is they're up against obstacles they can't overcome, and they may not overcome for some time to come unless something major shifts. So I appreciate you being here and bringing those points up. I just happen to disagree with your main tenet. but
Islamic State. Don't worry.
you're certainly entitled to hold on to it. Come on back in if you want to talk some more. I got to give some other people a turn. So we have Canadian Socialist. Real quick, we've already hit the 2 o'clock mark. I just want to share with the audience real quick. My name's Chip Barnes. I'm a geopolitical buff. I'm not a PhD or expert, but I know a lot about a lot of stuff because I'm a geek that studies this stuff. I'm a former Army officer. I used to serve in the first Gulf War on the front lines in a tank unit. So we were in Germany, we got shifted to there. Before I went into the Army in my senior year of college, I learned this completely by chance. One of my classmates gave a presentation on the first Intifada, which was the first big uprising in 1987 of the Palestinian people against occupation. And therefore, I didn't know any of this stuff. I didn't know what a West Bank was. I didn't know what a Gaza Strip was. As an American, I'm just a 21-year-old kid. And then I was like, wow, this is a totally different view of this. So from there, I've had a sincere interest in it because I thought it woke me up to it. I had no clue. So I've just studied it for a lot of times. Every time I could get a book or I could get a lecture or a podcast or whatever, Noam Chomsky, Norman Finkelstein, Ilyan Pape, Gideon Levy, Miko Peled, all these different people that I've learned from over the years, they're usually anti-Zionist. And why? Because it's what the Zionist movement, not to have a safe place for Jewish people to be, that's on the up and up, but it's how and where it happened and the injustices that accompanied that. And it was forced into a place that was not a land without a people for a people without a land. It was a land with a shitload of people who got forced off their land so another group could have that land, even though they have this 3,000-year-old mindset that it's theirs to begin with. And a lot of people still think that. So my shtick is, and this is my angle, this is why I do what I do, I try to be fair and objective. I try to be polite and listen to people. I try to understand your heart. I just repeated back to that person what I thought they were saying, and then I responded to it. And I don't try to use name calling and all that silliness, okay? And then I try to have a manageable conversation. That's sort of my method. And thankfully, people enjoy it. I appreciate everybody being here. Just to let you know my schedule, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I go from 8 p.m. Eastern until 10 p.m. So I'd love to have you come again if you want to. Please follow me. And then on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, I go from 12 noon, usually till about 2 p.m. Eastern time. But some days, if we have a lot of guests, I'll take it over if I have time, which I do today, thankfully. So next one here is Canadian Socialist. Please come on and tell us what's on your mind. Let me unmute you there if I had you muted. Sorry. There you go.
Canadian Shield, actually.
Say it again. It's Canadian what?
Shield.
Canadian, what does it say? I'm sorry.
Shield.
Canadian Shield. I apologize. I don't want to call
That's
it.
okay.
I think I did that once before.
I always find it funny. You see that S, you just go to Socialist for Canadians. I get it. Yeah, for the last guess, kind of like I get like the spirit of his argument in that, yeah, absolutely. If the Middle East was a unified state, it absolutely would be a superpower today just based off of oil reserves and things like that. But I don't think that waxing historically about empires lost solves any problems today. My main thing I wanted to just pop on here today, I'm not going to take up too much time, is I just wanted to give a little PSA, especially to the American listeners, about a website called, let me just pull it up here. I'm blanking on the name now that I'm on here, but it is a website which details, opensecrets.org. It details all of the political contributions by lobbyists to American politicians. All the information's on there. It's very broad. It's all downloadable as CSV files, so you can get access to that. If you go on there and type pro-Israel recipients, it'll give you all kinds of information. There's many more lobby groups that are pro-Israel in the US other than AIPAC. AIPAC just happens to be the largest. And there's a ton of great information on there. You can find out every politician who's received money from them and how much and how often. And it goes all the way back into the 90s for data.
Thanks for mentioning that. Somebody said recently, I have not verified this, that the site had washed itself, had cleansed off all of the AIPAC related donations off of opensecrets.org.
Nope. I was looking at it today and I was still able to pull up, go to contributors 23. It's just not showing for 23-24 yet, I don't think. Oh no, it is. So far for 23 to 24, they've contributed $7.7 million to American
Yeah,
politicians.
and again, okay, so remember that these are direct donations, right? That go directly to individuals' campaigns. Now, unfortunately, which is the real problem, is we have this thing called Citizens United, which was a court case that went to the Supreme Court, and it determined as the outcome that money is now considered First Amendment protected free speech. I know that sounds crazy. And also, there's something called corporate personhood. So
Yes.
corporations are people and money is speech. Like America has completely lost its mind. However, the implications of that is, and we have these weird systems that are sort of like wink, wink, nod, nod. So they set up these things called political action committees. They're basically places you can bundle money and they have a stated goal like American freedom or something like that. But what they really do behind the scenes, they're not supposed to directly coordinate with each candidate. That's illegal. So I can't call you up and say, hey, Senator so-and-so, I have this American Freedom PAC political action committee. How about if we run a bunch of advertisements in this location against this candidate that you're running? You know, they're not supposed to do that. But let's be clear. I mean, what do you think happens at cocktail parties, right? So the argument is it's separate, so it's legal. But this is the rub. There's no legal limit on how much a corporation or a high net worth donor or anybody else for that matter, a foreign country, can donate money in a dark way that you can't know who did it, including what AIPAC does, and all this money flows in. You don't know whose interests are being represented, and they run all these ads and spend money for people to go door to door and stuff. And they've infiltrated and controlled the political process, so it serves the interests of the special interest people and the high net worth people, and not the constituents. At least that's the argument against it. So even though Open Secrets is great for direct donations, which by the way are limited to certain amounts per candidate per election cycle. And most people max that out. It's like, what is it, like 3,500 or 4,500, something like that, maybe 6,000. But the real money comes from these political action committees and high net worth donors behind the scenes. And that's the problem with our system.
Yeah. Yeah, I will type the name in the chat after. I was going to say a good example is right now in Detroit, there's an incumbent who is pro ceasefire, and they don't even have an opponent yet. And Democratic Majority for Israel, which is another PAC, has already spent $100,000 running campaigns against them, like advertisements.
Crazy, huh? And AIPAC publicly, if you didn't know, did you hear about AIPAC publicly committing $100 million to try to unseat 7 sitting Congress people?
No, I'll look up for Eric's tonight.
Yeah, that's how, listen, this is how brazen these special interest groups have become. Normally you do that behind the scenes, right? Just kind of keep it quiet, but actually let the money flow. This is how brazen AIPAC is. They think they own the place, which in many cases we do. They say, we're going to dedicate, this is publicly, we're going to give out so what is that? What did I just say? $100 million to take out 7 candidates. Now the average spend for a congressional seat, the amount of money that they spend on the campaign, is anywhere between $3 and $5 million now. It's more for senators. So they're tripling or quadrupling the amount of money they're willing to spend on their opponent to try to get somebody to replace them. And something like 94 or 97% of the time, the candidate who spends the most money, whether it's directly or indirectly, they win.
Yeah, and AIPAC brags on their homepage about 98% of their candidates winning.
Yeah, so I mean, they obviously have a strong input. There's a video I'm about to drop where I talk about a U.S. congressman. His name was James Traficant. He's unfortunately deceased, but he went against the Israel lobby while he was in Congress, which is something you really don't want to do. So he ended up getting taken to prison for quote unquote bribery charges, which I don't know if they were legit or not. And then when he got out of prison, he was mysteriously gone, right? Under dubious circumstances, which happens a lot in these political situations. There's a lot of allegations. I don't have substantiation, but it's unusual that bad things tend to happen for people that push back. I'm just saying that. So, and his video says, he specifically says to Greta Van Susteren, who used to be someone who worked for Fox News, he says exactly what the political dynamics are such that the impact AIPAC has on the political scene is inordinate and very oppressive.
Earlier you mentioned that Israel, shows through its actions that it's not willing to have a two-state, but it doesn't do it with its words. But we do have a new quote today from Bibi himself. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Thursday he has told the United States that he opposes the establishment of a Palestinian state as a part of any post-war scenario. And his actual quote is from his press conference, "In any future arrangement, Israel needs security control of all territory west of Jordan." This collides with the idea of sovereignty, what can you do?
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah.
Well, those are excellent contributions. Thank you so much for bringing that to our attention today. Those are, and the other thing Netanyahu has said in the past is if you want to stymie the ability of a two-state solution, the best thing we can do is to fund the H group to create divisiveness between the PA and the Gaza government.
Yeah.
And it's happened, right? So, again, the thing that bothers me the most about this, I don't know if you feel the same way, no matter whatever happens, the Palestinians always get the short end of the stick, no matter what, every single time.
Yeah, it's they've never been offered a solution that didn't involve continued occupation or loss of more land.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome stuff. Thanks for coming up today. I really appreciate
No problem.
it. Have a great day. And I
You
won't
too.
call you, I promise not to call you socialist again. I'm so sorry about that. Canadian Shield, good person there. Okay, thanks for the info. That was really helpful. Next person on the list is, it says global, I can't see the rest.
I say
Global.
hello,
Hello.
from Germany. It's Global Grow for you.
Okay.
Once,
Willkommen von Deutschland.
yeah, you're welcome also. I won't tell you my story, and I won't tell you the situation in Germany. I was born in Turkey, 1969, and excuse me for my English is not so well.
Okay.
I was born in 1969 in Turkey. I come to Europe with 2 years. I was 2 years old. And I won't tell you the situation in Germany about Israel and Palestine. The situation with the government in Germany is so, they say we stay to Israel 100%.
Yeah.
They say the reporter, the Gazette ask the politician how you stay, what you say about the genocide in Palestine. They don't answer. They say we don't make comments. We stay 100% to Israel. I don't understand this. I don't know, you know the situation in Germany with the government, how they stay with Israel. You know
Yeah,
the situation? Yeah.
it's pretty bad, the fact that the Germans are guilted into doing things to support the Israelis that under normal circumstances they would never do.
I'm 100% with you. 100% with you. And 100% with the Palestine. I can't understand how the government say we don't make comments about the genocide in Palestine. And I don't understand this. That's
Well, it's about politics, right? So remember, the United States is aligned with Germany, and there's a lot of other issues going on with respect to energy and things like this, and it all plays together. And so, even in Germany, some of the laws are crazy locally about waving Palestinian flags and stuff like that. I've seen the police, the Polizei, go after people with Palestinian flags in some cases. So it's just everything seems upside down, right? We have a country that used to engaged in active extermination of a people, and now it's supporting another nation that's doing the same, or at least to some degree. It's you shake your head, right?
Yes. If we go to demos, we can't say the word children. We can't say the word genocide. They take us in the jail if we use these words. It's not
Wow.
normal.
Yeah, that's messed up. Well, thank you for letting us know what's happening in Deutschland. I appreciate it, and
Thank you also.
Good luck with everything. Everything in Germany is changing. I used to live there, and I lived in Hanau, which is in an area called Essen. And it's changed a lot since I was there. And it's a beautiful country still, don't get me wrong, but the political climate's gotten worse, and what's happening in terms of their economic situation has been declining because a lot of it's because of the United States, let's face it. And that's a whole nother conversation. Oh boy. Okay, real quickly before we go to our next guest, we have K-Tonic. Just a second, I'll bring you up. I just want to let you know there's a couple different topics that I wanted to ask the audience if they're interested in hearing about for subsequent lives or even on videos. So I mentioned earlier in the video that I was an Uber driver, which I got to tell you, I learned a lot, not only about people, but about how the Uber company works. So do me a favor, if you ever want to hear more about that, and I can tell you my experience, I had devised a great way to make money, and they figured it out and they crushed it. So, but if you ever want to hear about that, do me a favor, type the number 1 in the chat, and then I'll talk about it sometime. And if you don't, no problem. If I don't see a bunch of ones, then no reason to get into it. But trust me, it's very interesting what they do. Their business model is really, really, it's duplicitous. And the way they treat the drivers is horrendous. And so for those of you who drive Uber as a passenger, yeah, it's convenient, right? And it's more expensive than it used to be. And listen, I like it as a user too. You click one button and you got a ride, right? But the shit they're doing to drivers now, it is reprehensible what the company has done. And the money that's going to the management versus the pay they've cut the drivers is it's disgusting. So the problem is it's very hard they've spent so much money to build out their customer base. It's just hard to compete with that. And they've still losing money, believe it or not. Anyway, I can talk about that at a later time. I just want to see if anybody cares. The other thing I wanted to talk about, if you're up for it, 2 things actually. One is a senatorial candidate in the state of New York. Now, I bash American politics all the time. So you might be saying, well, hey, Chip, why would you want to support somebody if you think voting doesn't matter or voting is less effective? Well, listen, it's not either or, it's and. And anytime you can get a better person in a group, they can at least get their voice out in the public sphere if they get into office, right? So at a bare minimum, it's good to have, someone in who's a good person. So a person named Diane Sayre, who's running for the New York Senate seat. Of course, Chuck Schumer's the other senator there. So I'd like to talk about Diane sometime. I'm actually going to have her on as a guest next Wednesday. She's going to come on for at least an hour and a half, 2 hours. And she's a nice person. I like her personally, but I really like what she stands for. And then the last thing is related to finance and trading. So I'm on my journey right now to try to improve. I've been at it for a long time, but I've never given it enough of a go to get good at it. So I'm working with somebody now who I think will really help me get over the hump. But if that's not something that interests you, so do me a favor, type the number 3 if you're interested in hearing more about how trading works. Because, if you get good at it, you can set your financial independence, but it's a lot of work to get good at it, right? So let's face it. And most people, including myself, by the way, want a shortcut, right? We want to make the money now. Like you want to be able to place a trade and buy this great stock. And it usually doesn't work that way. You can get lucky. But the traders who make the most money, they put in a ton of time and work. And, it's a lot of work, right? And it's a very, very deep, it's like, imagine trying to play a PGA golf event as a beginner. But the problem is you're allowed into the tournament, and at trading, all you have to have is some money and they let you in the arena. But a golf tournament, you have to work your way up, right? So it's unfair that all it is the people who are experienced taking money from the people who aren't. So I can get into that sometime too. I can maybe bring on, there's the guy that I met, his name is Velas. And, he's a unique individual. I'll put it this way. He's confident, to say the least, and but he's extremely good at what he does. And so he uses language and he communicates in a way that I don't. And that's his choice. Maybe if I could set a perfect world, I could get him to be a little more subtle, but he's great at what he does and he can carry that torch however he wants to. So I'm just happy to have the help because I'm in the point where I need to make some money, right? The reality is that if I don't do something soon, I'm going to be on Skid Row. So, or start another company or something like that. So anyway, and by the way, there has been somebody who I met through this app. This is crazy, who has offered me a free house to live in. One of her family members passed away and she's offered me a place to stay, which is incredibly generous, right? So hopefully I won't have to take somebody up on that. I can keep my own thing going. I'm, 56-year-old guy, right? So I'd love to talk about it. And listen, I know enough about trading to train most people, but I'm not that good at it. So, but I'm hoping to get better. So maybe we can do our journey together, right? Okay. The next guest is let me get your microphone off there.
Ask the ICJ.
Hey, Chip.
Hey,
Thanks for having me on here. Listen, I think I can speak for most of us that I think we'd enjoy listening to you speak on any of those topics and more, right? I, for one, really appreciate your keen mind and just your varied interests, especially with like regional geopolitics, right? And I don't know if you've read or any of your viewers have read the book by George Friedman, The Next 100 Years, I believe it's called. Um,
no.
It's a great one. It's a little bit dated at this point. It was written in the 90s, but it's just about geopolitical connectivity, and it goes a little bit predictive and, like laying out this man's predictions for, he's a geopolitical analyst, how proxy engagements are going to be waged over the next 100 years. Like I said, it's a little bit dated at this point, but what it can help with is just, train your mind to look for these patterns, right, across the world. Anyways, that was just a quick aside. What I really wanted to ask you about was, you may have read about what's happening between Iran and Pakistan as of yesterday, right? Iran launched some strikes on some terrorist cells in Pakistan's Balochistan region. And then last night, Pakistan fired some missiles back, killed about 9 people in Iran. And, I think a lot of people would wonder why, especially at this tense time, Iran would want to open up an engagement on their eastern front beyond everything that's going on in the Middle East. Now, what I'm wondering, I'd love your perspective on, if you look at like a lot of the media sources, like for instance, I was on the BBC a few minutes ago, and they're just treating it in very simple terms, looking at Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard as kind of a petulant child that's just lashing out because they have their hands tied and action is expected of them in some way, shape, or form. But if you look at the history of Pakistan, especially like over the past few years since the Biden administration, the U.S. has gone cold on Pakistan, right? Brookings actually had a good thought piece about this, about how they
actually forced a coup of Imran Khan.
Exactly. So, there's this double speak with Pakistan where Biden has not called into the prime minister or really anyone in Pakistan since he's taken office. But at the same time, you have Lloyd Austin going in there, and they're trying to keep the partnership warm because, of course, it is an ally, right, and an asset in a security sense. But especially with the withdrawal from Afghanistan, the value has dropped significantly. So what I'm wondering is, if you think there's some sort of proxy level engagement going on over here where Iran struck out to show a, kind of a sign of strength that, hey, we can strike, and Pakistan, similarly, they're having conversations because everything that happens over there with the military apparatus, the U.S. is in the know, right? And I believe it was as of last year, there's like a $430 million deal for the upgrade of the Pakistani F-16 fleet going on, and I'm sure that's tied to some commitments of protecting U.S. interests. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are there.
Well, I think you have your finger on the pulse pretty well, and I think your supposition that there may be some U.S. involvement there. Let me give you an idea what happened in Syria as an example. So what the Americans did, if you don't know, is not only did the Americans occupy a portion of Syria where there's a lot of rich resources, including oil and a lot of grain production. Again, the way this works is the U.S. tries to involve different regimes who they don't like in difficulties. The idea being if the population were to be affected adversely by some sort of intervention or other groups that get funded, it would destabilize the country, maybe turn the population politically against the incumbent leader, and then have a shift in regime, a sort of an indirect regime change operation. That's what's going on in all these cases. So why does the U.S. want to change Iran's leadership? Well, obviously, Iran is probably aspiring to have greater weapons at some point, right? They have different capabilities. They don't want to have that bulkhead. Also, they're a major ally with Iran and with Russia and China. The U.S. has interest in Taiwan. It has interest that want to break up Russia. And everything's about business and potential business and controlling resources and having power with military bases, right? It's this big chessboard. So why would the U.S. want to get Iran embroiled in a conflict on the Eastern Front? Good question. Well, anytime your adversary is dealing with multiple problems, they're distracted, they're spinning plates in different places. Look what happened with Ukraine and Russia. Why did the U.S. back Ukraine? Why did we, the country, give so much money to Ukraine? Like, what is the importance to us, right? Well, it's not important to us per se. It's important strategically to the U.S. Missile Command and the proximity of creeping up on Germany with NATO and stuff like that. But if you can destabilize the Russian Federation such that the people are tired of having their sons and daughters come home in body bags, like what happened in Vietnam here in the United States, creates unrest. And the U.S. wants Vladimir Putin out bad for a number of reasons, both politically, militarily, and economically. Because they had a guy named Yeltsin before him who was like the perfect guy. And then Putin came in and kind of reversed all the perfection that was in place, and it flipped the script, so to speak. And they haven't been able to get back in since, so they want him gone. Similar to Nicolas Maduro down in Venezuela, Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua, the leadership in Cuba. It's always the same story. Haiti's a great example too. Anyway, it's destabilize, cause chaos, keep your enemy fragmented, overcome, take shit over, use it, abuse it, leave it. That's kind of the American way, unfortunately. And they use financial tools, they use military tools, they use non-governmental organizations, they use all sorts of infiltrative tactics, three-letter agencies, the whole nine. It's ugly, right? It's the ugly underbelly of American empire. If you want to check this stuff out, if you want a good underpinning of how it got to this point, you can read two books to read, or two authors to follow. Michael Parenti, Parenti, is excellent in terms of covering these types of dynamics, all of which fit together with a similar theme. And then you can study the economic part of it, which is by a guy named John Perkins. And he has a book called Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And that's a good depiction of how the US and the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund and the International Finance Corporation are used as tools as a part of American and British and multinational empire. Fascinating stuff. And it's been in place for decades. There's been a recent pull away from that because people get smart to it after a while. They're like, F this. So there's some fragmentation going on and a lot of anti-empire stuff in Africa. So it's interesting. And the Chinese sphere of influence is increased dramatically in places like Africa and throughout Asia. And the US doesn't like that. And the US doesn't like the fact that China is trying to reunify Taiwan, which has a separate governing apparatus, but it's supposed to be part of a broader one China. And there's a lot of semiconductor production on Taiwan. 90% of all the best semiconductors are made off, a few miles off the coast of China. And if the China and US go to war and the US and China has control over Taiwan, well, we don't get any chips. Not this kind of chip, microprocessors, which everything today runs on microprocessors, right? So that's a big deal. So it's always the same thing. I would be shocked if there wasn't some US involvement in fomenting unrest to pull the Iranians into some sort of conflict. It's what they're trying to do to distract them from being able to support what's going on right now in the West versus Israel and supporting Hezbollah and the Houthis. That's a guess. I don't know, but that's usually what's going on. Someone's getting paid. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely does. Thank you for the book recommendation. What was the second one that you mentioned there?
It's called Confessions of an Economic Hitman by John Perkins.
Awesome. I'll check that out. Thank you so much, Chip.
Yeah, sure thing. Michael Parenti, though, I'm telling you, read his books are phenomenal. Phenomenal.
Michael Parenti. Cool.
Michael Parenti, Parenti, Michael Parenti. Okay, so we're going to go a little bit longer here. I could probably go till about 3 o'clock, which is about 30 more minutes. I tend to go over. One time I went 8 hours and 15 minutes with no breaks, which is stupid, right? So we have Fooly. I'll unfool you here. What are you going to fool me about?
What's up? What's up, Chip?
Hey.
So I've been in here before. I only came in one time, but just to kind of say my piece. And there are 339 people in here. And, one of the main reasons why I wanted to join is because I've come across so many videos of people stitching your videos and basically, just trying to refute whatever you say or make you seem like, you're crazy or make you seem, dumb. And it really sucks to see. And a lot of people don't, use their own eyes to actually observe a situation. And, I think I said this in here before, but I'm gonna just echo it again. In my, years of life and all my years of life being on this earth and observing things and looking at things and internalizing things and, drawing my own conclusions to stuff, I have never seen something that has harmed or persecuted more Jewish people than what's going on right now with like the modern Zionist movement. And, it's more in the public eye, and a thing that a lot of people will say is, oh, you didn't care before October 7th, why do you care now? Or there's so many things going on in the Congo or here or there, why do you care about this? And that all comes down to the accessibility of social media and the fact that people who never would have been able to tell someone from, you know, the US or the UK or Germany or Ireland or somewhere in Africa about the hardships that they face in their life in their country. They never would have been able to do that. Now they're able to do that without, you know, having to have taken a boat to the US or taken a plane to the US to tell somebody word of mouth what is happening. So that's why more people are seeing what's going on and speaking about what's going on. It's not a trend or it's not a, you know, performative activism. You know, some people are doing that. Some people are taking this as a chance to kind of blow up or to you know, have more clout. But for the most part, most people are just saying like, yo, this is wrong. This is happening right now. There's something we can do about it if we keep talking about it. Why would we stop talking about it? That's basically what's going on. And I actually just came from another live where, you know, it was a full pro-Zionist live. They were all Israelis. And, you know, the hardest people to talk to aren't the U.S. Zionists, aren't the ones who sympathize or empathize with Zionists and the ones who go like, oh, October 7th was a tragedy. It was horrible. You know, it's not those people. It's the actual Israelis that are like saying the craziest stuff. And I don't blame them. I mean, it ties into patriotism. It ties into nationalism. It ties into their identity as wanting to be strong and side with their side. You know what I mean? But I just came from another live and I kind of explained, I asked a question, you know, they were talking about how, you know, kids in Gaza and in Palestine are bred to hate Jews and, you know, they're taught to kill people and blah, blah, blah. And I laughed about it and I was like, you really think that? And they kind of got quiet, but then they started saying, yeah, we really think that. We know that. I've heard this, I've heard that. And it's crazy to hear some of them speak because I wish they could hear themselves in third person because, you know, some of the things that they're saying are things that directly apply to them, yet they want it to apply to the other side. And, you know, I brought up October 7th. I was like, yeah, October 7th happened. It was a very, very, I wouldn't say sophisticated, but it was an organized event. And, you know, if you even take the evidence that the state of Israel has provided, that they did provide at least, you know, a month after October 7th, you take a look at the list and you take a look at the things they're saying in writing, and then you take a gander at what they're saying, what their spokespeople, what their government officials are saying, none of it lines up. Like it shouldn't be that hard to distinguish, you know, fallacies in stories, but for some reason, most Zionists have a problem with doing that because they want to feel like they're right in the cause that is happening right now, which is, you know, ethnic cleansing. You could like it or not, it is ethnic cleansing what's happening right now. You know, more than 100,000 people at this point would not have been moved from their homes or their lands if what's happening right now was not happening. So it is ethnic cleansing. But, you know, I brought up
It's a lot more than 100,000. It's a lot more than 100,000.
Oh yeah, I just said 100,000 to have a baseline. You know what I mean? But you know, I brought it up and I was like, if you take a look at the lists or the things that they have said in writing, like let's say the beheaded babies or the bodies burned or the grapes, you know, there's not any type of hard evidence that has come out since October 7th about any of those things. And it's like if a terror group, so let's take ISIS, for example. They're a terror group, obviously. You know, another person's freedom fighter.
Let's just do us a favor, Fool. I don't want to cut you off, but we have 6 other people that are waiting. I got to give them some time too. So if you could finish out your conversation in a couple seconds. It's okay.
So a terror group is proud of what they're doing. They'll put it on the internet and they'll be like, look at this baby we just threw into a furnace, or look at this, you know, terrible thing we just did. Yay, let's, you know, I want to show you guys this. Yeah. If that's what Hamas was doing, that would have been all over the internet by now. You know, it wouldn't be like you have to join a Telegram group to see this, or you have to go this place to see this. No, it would have been all over the open internet. And it's like when you ask them to think about these things logically, they either get mad or they start calling you an anti-Semite. And it's like, it's crazy what's going on right now. And I hope things can get better. I really do, because, man, I have never seen so much anti-Semitism in my life. But yeah, that's really all I wanted to say. I kind of wanted to just echo what I said last time. So, yeah.
Okay. Thanks for doing it. Appreciate it. Thanks for being here. Yeah, there was a guy named Bassam Youssef. I don't know. He's an Egyptian comedian. He was on the Patrick Bet David podcast. He was having a back and forth with Adam, who's one of the co-hosts there. And he said that. He's like, listen, what T-word groups do is they brag about or they display their barbarism. Remember, people were put in cages and dropped underwater. They were, they're lit on fire. There was all sorts of other crazy stuff. All those ISIS videos. And his claim is if the H group had footage like that, they would have put it out to show, maybe it was GoPro cameras that got captured on the site and the little data didn't make it back. That's possible, but I doubt it. And if there were evidence for the things they've claimed, these atrocities, I think it would have gotten out by now. And the more we see, the more we learn that what was said initially is not standing. So anyway, yes, who's next?
Hey, Chip, do you mind if I go? Because there were a lot of claims in there that I would really like to.
Yeah, please do. You're next. Please go ahead.
Much appreciated. There are only just a few things. So first and foremost, I'm an observant and practicing Jew and also a Zionist.
Okay.
And the first thing that I want to really address is the claim that he made that Zionism hurts Judaism. And
Okay.
as somebody who has been involved in the Jewish community for many, many years, I grew up as a conservative Jew. This, I don't know if it's just because the only type of Jews that you guys are all speaking to are anti-Zionist Jews, but the vast majority of Jews are Zionists. And the vast majority of Jews will agree that Israel creates safety for Jews in the diaspora, because ultimately when Jews have not had a homeland, we have a history, about 2,000 years worth of it, even, of course, and then the 1,000 years as well prior, that Jews are constantly exiled out of wherever they are and are never really truly assimilated or are thought to be equivalent. I think what's always interesting around anti-Semitism, for instance, is everyone likes to talk about where does anti-Semitism come from? And the term and the etymology of the actual term itself comes from how Europeans looked at Jews. And they said they were not Europeans, they were Semites. We were known as Semites in Europe. And so the terminology, the term itself comes from discrimination against Jews by Europeans. And so
Okay.
I'm more than happy to keep going. The second thing that I really want to talk about is this idea about proud, what you guys just finished on around terrorist groups and essentially those who are proud to show themselves. There is GoPro footage, and I think it's interesting that I don't know if you guys just haven't seen the footage. CNN literally just posted video footage of somebody sawing the head off of a murdered body. There's been footage online that has leaked out. The reason that Israel has not released it to the grand public is out of respect for the families, but they have shown it to a multitude of political leaders and others as well who have walked out of that video, 47 minutes, which is 47 of thousands of minutes of footage that Hamas themselves did because they were proud. And then there's also evidence of Hamas people who were there, who called home to express their joy for what they had just done. And so I find it interesting. I don't know if you guys just aren't seeing it, if you're not looking for it, but it does exist out there. And I think it would be premium of you, if you are going to speak on this, to say that it doesn't exist, because it does. It's out there, and all you really have to do is Google it.
Let me review what you said and make sure I got it all down. So you're saying that the fact that you disagree with the fact that Zionism hurts Jews because there's more Jews that are Zionists than not. That's the first thing you said. Then you said that it's safer for Jews not only in Israel but throughout the diaspora because of the homeland. And then you said that because of the historical persecution, there was a lot of anti-Semitism in Europe. And then you mentioned these atrocities that you've seen video from that you don't think most people who are denying them have either seen or have tried to see, one of which included the removal of a head after someone had already perished, and other types of atrocities. So let me just address that briefly for you. So some other things that have just floated out in the ether that I've heard about, and correct me if I'm wrong. So a lot of people have been fleeing Israel. who are Jewish. And I've heard people make the argument that because of the the disproportionate response that the world is outraged about, whether people believe it's justified or not from the Israeli side, has angered the world to an extent that it's increased anti-Semitism, more so than it would have been on its own. That's one argument. Let me hold on. I'm going to give you a chance. I'm going to give you a chance. I promise. I just got to give you these few points, and I'll give you the floor for a full 2 minutes or whatever. Okay, that's how I do it. I'm very polite. Okay, and I'm not going to step on you and say that I win and then kick you off. That's not how I do it. So, but just to answer, so a lot of the atrocities, though, remember, let's be real, okay? A lot of the atrocities that were initially claimed when the events first kicked off on the 7th were overblown and didn't have any evidence to prove them, right? There was no 40 babies, this, that, and the other. As far as we can tell, you mentioned there may be evidence we haven't seen, I haven't seen any direct evidence other than people's supposed testimony. I've seen no video of graping occurring or burning for that matter. Now, vehicles who were struck during the fleeing from the event did burn and bodies within them burned. Okay. But as far as somebody like putting somebody in a room and lighting them on fire, I did watch an after review of Owen Jones, who's a British YouTuber who lives in France, who was invited by the Israeli government to view, along with other journalists, the footage, the reel of footage they showed Elon Musk and Michael Rappaport and all these other people. You mentioned it a second ago. Now, although Owen did point out 2 very horrific things that happened that day, including somebody in a shelter throwing a grenade in while his 2 sons watched, and an adult male obviously didn't survive that. And the other thing he said he saw somebody who was already unalived that was in a home who happened to be of Thai descent, Thailand, and they were taking a rake and like hitting the person below the chin to try to, remove that part of their body after they were dead. I just heard what you said, that there were people who were unalived, and then subsequent to that, they were trying to remove the top of their body as well. And the other thing I heard, which no one mentioned before, but I saw a video of people of obviously the age group going into the kibbutzim and around the kibbutzim, or people were in their cars. They fired on them. Of course, you can imagine what happened. And I saw 6 different drivers/passengers from my own 2 eyes get hit, which of course I wholly disagree with. And I wanted to say finally just to you, on behalf of the fact that civilians were harmed, I think that's horrendous. And I think that should never happen. If they're armed and they're wearing a uniform and they're fighting back, okay, fair game. If they're a reservist, I don't know, it's kind of a gray area. But if they're a younger person or an older person, as far as I know, that's what's called haram, which means that according to the tenets of Islam, they're off limits. Just as there's claiming that they're treating properly those who have been taken from back into Gaza. I don't have every bit of evidence and details though, but it does make me wonder, and I'll finish with this. It does make people like me wonder that this is a problem with like the boy who cried wolf. If you lie publicly about 1 thing, 2 things, and 3 things, and then you say, hey, I got evidence of 4, 5, and 6, people scratch their head and go, really? Like it just leaves us a seed of doubt. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I want to address kind of like the blowback argument that somehow like what Israel does or the existence of Israel is essentially responsible for anti-Semitism. And that's basically just like a victim blaming argument, right? In that Jews are essentially responsible for their own anti-Semitism.
I didn't say that. I said the disproportionate response by the military. That's what I said.
The idea of Israelis like fleeing en masse. Right now, there is a huge issue within the economy because of how many people got called up to the reservists. There's also a lot of issues around displacement. Easily, I think was something like 50, 60,000 people are currently internally displaced, if not more. And one of the challenges right now is because of tens of thousands of foreign workers, both who are Palestinian and also Thai workers, are not able to work the agricultural field, since that was like one of the major sources of labor.
Right.
A lot of people are currently like basically just going to Cyprus until like the violence is over, because they don't really feel like having thousands of rockets shot over and like barraged by thousands of rockets constantly. So that's like one of the reasons why that's happening. Ultimately, like the excuse or the argument that like Israel increases the actions of Israel increases anti-Semitism in the world is essentially a catch-22, right? Because then what you're essentially arguing is that if your argument is that Israel were to never respond in this disproportionate manner, then we would see a decrease in anti-Semitism in the world. And basically, if you kind of want to use the bookends between 2014 and this year, we've actually seen an increase in anti-Semitism around the world. So even before 2023, before the war, we saw an increase in anti-Semitism around the world. So we can't necessarily say that it is it's due to this very specific thing. Secondly, when it comes to like the hard evidence, I think it was interesting that you brought up Owen Jones and basically referenced Owen Jones as this singular person to push back, and are using him to basically disregard the dozens and dozens of other people who have said the exact opposite of what he's saying. So I think if you're looking for like a biased argument that says, okay, well, this one person somehow negates the other 50, 60, 100, 150 people, I guess that's your prerogative to do so. I can't do anything about that.
Listen, to be fair, I'm not trying to say that Owen Jones is the only person who has an accurate depiction of what was seen. If you don't mind, can you share just one or two names of people who you think is a better, more rounded, proper account than someone like Owen? Because I tend to trust Owen, but of course, anything
they showed it to the European. They showed it to the European Parliament. And like multiple members of the European Parliament stated that they were abhorred by what they saw. People walked out, had to throw up. Our own American politicians walked out and threw up. That's all I can say. I think it's kind of a moot point.
What does but here's the question. No, I'm not trying to know. What does that, in other words, to confer the things that you said happened, that evidence for those, saying that somebody felt sick could have been because of the person being hit in the neck with the rake, or could have been because of the father being hurt in the shelter, the same things that Owen disclosed. There may be others that he didn't disclose, but saying somebody was, they found it abhorrent doesn't clarify the specific claims that the people have made.
I guess what I'm wondering though is like, does it ultimately matter? Are you essentially arguing that like because somebody was only murdered but not beheaded, like that is better?
No, my point is that it's all about the allegations. I'm not trying to say about the merits of civilians. I've clarified that. What I'm saying is that the pattern of atrocity propaganda, which is the general term used to describe when somebody embellishes or increases the horrific nature of some sort of interaction between human beings, that pattern has been established by virtue of what was said initially, that therefore the subsequent claims that people say, trust us, it's in the film, but we have no indication of that, and including the people that have seen it have said something different than the totality of that propaganda.
I mean, there is hard evidence. Number one, there is hard evidence of like people being burned alive. There is hard evidence from those who recovered. I mean, it took a lot, frankly, of time because of how dismembered and just like how true, like it took weeks in order to identify victims because of like the state of their bodies. And then when they actually go in for forensic evidence, there is hard forensic evidence. Hold on a second.
This is really important to clarify.
Of terrible.
I just want to be able to interject here and there. I'm not trying to mute you all the way. Trust me, I'm going to let you talk. But when you make a claim like that, I just want to ask you a question, because you didn't clarify where and how when you made those claims about trying to identify the burned victims. So there's a big difference between somebody directly like gathering people up into a room and lighting them on fire, whatever, or if they're in a vehicle that was fired upon, presumably by the IDF in their response, where they were told, we weren't sure what's going on, just go after whatever because we want to get rid of the people who are the bad guys. If we lose some good guys, that sucks. But now, are you talking about those victims or other victims? Because that's a big difference.
I'm talking about if you look at the report from Zaka, which went in and looked at the forensic evidence, they noted, and also the allegations around sexual violence was confirmed and reported in the New York Times, that stated of what was done in terms of people being burned alive, of women having just terrible things shoved into them. And then you have eyewitness testimony from children and from people explaining like what happened. And ultimately, I want to be very clear. I want to be very serious on this.
Have you seen the IDF said that? That's how this is.
Hold on.
IDF says this.
Hold on. Let him finish. Hold on, James Dean. Hold on. I want to be fair. Okay. We're trying to have a fair dialogue. I just want to be able to ask something once in a while because you're going on a lot of things. So I'm not trying to stop you. Just you keep going and don't stop. On that claim, though, I understand you're saying that people have testified to that. Let me give you one counter, okay? Just to share with you the difficulty of trusting hey, trust us, somebody said this argument, okay? I'm not saying it didn't happen. I can't say for sure. But saying somebody said it happened doesn't mean it happened. Let me give you one example, okay? I made a video about this. I don't know if you've seen it yet. So one of the first few hostages, the Israeli hostage who got released, was a woman who had her left arm hurt. So she's got dark hair. She speaks mostly Hebrew, a little bit English. When she was released into the Red Cross's custody inside a vehicle, somebody with a camera said, hey, what happened? Like, how was your experience? How were you treated? Whatever. She says, they treated me very good, very kind, fed me good food, everything
Sorry,
was okay.
hold on. It's like we're really going to believe. So you're gonna.
Hold on. Let me finish. No, listen. Let me finish the thought, and then I'm happy to let you listen. So there was no H group members anywhere near her. She was completely out of the hands of the H group. They were nowhere near this. This is in a Red Cross vehicle after the fact. This is not an H group person. This is an independent journalist or Israel, whomever was talking to her. That wasn't clear in the video. But about a month and a half later, she went on Israeli TV and said something entirely differently. So I'm just watching the video. You're talking about things that were said by others off camera. Okay,
So
maybe it
I
happened.
think it's a little
But
absurd.
what I'm saying is, I'm using this as an example, and I'm going to let you finish. Let me finish. Just don't jump in. I'll shut up and let you talk for 2 straight minutes, I promise. But by virtue of seeing that pattern of behavior where somebody says one thing on camera when they have no reason to lie, and then they later say something on national TV that appears as if they've changed their story entirely. That's dubious, right? So the trust us argument, somebody said it, therefore it is so, is hard to take on face value. That's all I'm trying to say. I'll shut up and let you talk.
This will be the last thing to say because I think we're obviously going nowhere. But the idea that the quote unquote like no reason to lie while there are still hostages in Israel, in Gaza, and that you don't actually know whether or not she had a reason to lie, and also she was still under duress, and the idea that she had no reason to lie, basically assuming that like Hamas or like the International Red Cross is not in line with them since they have not actually visited any of the hostages as well, is again like just a showcase of like where you kind of like lend your trust into. But like ultimately, I guess like the last thing that I would say, I find it a little ironic and throughout over the last 3 months around allegations around sexual violence and rape is that for literally up until this point, the argument has always been that you believe all women, and that testimony is perfectly fine for women to like is essentially proof. And so if all of you on the left like essentially want to say that I would like basically what women say is no longer valid, and we should not actually believe all women anymore, then like I guess that's your prerogative to do so. I think that you're ultimately going to harm future rape victims because of what you guys have argued over the last 3 months.
Can I say something to this?
Can't hear you, Chip. No audio.
I'm sorry. I'm going to do a quick response. Thanks for being here. I appreciate what you said, and I understand your point of view. And it's a perfectly legitimate point of view to take by looking at it from that vantage point. I'm not certain. I'm not saying for sure things didn't happen because eyewitness testimony is not necessarily invalid. He made a good point that it's fair to believe what a woman said rather than doubt it. Okay. Here's where the challenge comes in for those of us looking from the outside. I just shared an example where there was video evidence. This wasn't a conversation somebody said they had. This wasn't somebody in the car that was driving said, this person told me this. On camera. They were no longer in the custody of the H group. They were free from any kind of harm. And they asked her, how was it? And she gave what seemed to be her honest reply, right? And maybe at the time she was traumatized and she lied for trauma. That doesn't sound plausible. Then a month later on TV, having gone back to Israel and probably having somebody said to her, hey, this does not reflect well on our mission. As an Israeli citizen, you have a right to support the cause. Therefore, let's go on TV and claim, say something that was bad because we don't need to be talking fondly about these people. And so therefore, that's a guess of mine. I'm guessing, and if I had to wager, somebody put a gun to my head and said, do you think she was lying after the fact or was she telling the truth? I would say to protect my life that she was lying. And if a polygraph was done and it turns out she was lying, I live. If she's telling the truth, I die. I'd stake my life on it. That's how strongly I feel about that. Now, maybe that sounds a little over the top, but I go with evidence, not hearsay. That's what we have to go with, right? So with regards to the other atrocities, some of which have been documented in evidence and people who have seen them, I believe Owen Jones is a relatively down the middle guy, much as myself. I could be wrong about that. If there are other people, not European Union members who saw something and felt sick, but John Smith or Jane Doe, who's credible and can say, yeah, I saw it. This is what happened. I'm believing that. Okay, that's evidence. I'll take that, right? But all this sort of third-party reference, believe me, somebody said it. The Israeli apparatus, unfortunately, has a long and sordid history of not telling the truth to the public, as indicated by what was said at the beginning of the reference of the day, which is babies, the whole 9 yards. So how can you trust somebody when you say, well, trust me this time, even though I lied 18 times before, this time it's true, I swear. The boy who cried wolf. We all know that story. Again, I know this is offline. It's not fair to not give the person a chance to respond. Is if I see evidence to the contrary, I shared what I've seen on both sides, what I thought was dubious and what actually happened that I did see. So I'm not trying to be unfair. And the things that I did see, in addition to shooting a dog, which was horrible because I'm a huge animal lover, it's despicable. So in any case, when a civilian was harmed by a combatant or by maybe just an idiot who came across the border that day with a gun, that's horrific. If there were violent crimes, SA crimes against women, where they have parts of their body removed and they have things put into them, or they were unalived and or raped, horrific, unacceptable, disgusting, horrible. But if you're from America, I want to share one thing with you before we bring the next guest on. If you're from the United States and you like the fact that you're here and free today, as do I, we got to look back and be fair, okay? There was this thing called the British occupation of colonial America, where the colonies had British soldiers quartered in people's houses, right? They had no representation in the government, and they didn't like that. And the conditions under which the American colonists lived was nowhere near as bad as the conditions that the Palestinians live under, being blockaded, having their entire lives controlled by an outside party, an act of war, and also in the West Bank, what they endure militarily. It's horrific, way worse than the colonists. Now, what did the colonists do in the United States? They resisted. Not everybody. Some people had businesses and they didn't fight back because they were doing okay, and they pay the taxes and life goes on. They didn't want to risk their whatever. Some people did. They're what we call the patriots, right? We refer to them as patriots. They're our forefathers who we exalt on pieces of currency and statues. Damn Mount Rushmore, for God's sakes, right? But we don't call them T-words. But guess what the British called them? When we would ambush a British convoy going down the road, 10 or 12 U.S. patriots would musket fire them and then run the hell off. Is that considered T-word? Well, according to the time of day then, they weren't fighting fair. So yes, that was T-rism. When they would go into a plantation home that had been stolen from them by a British officer, and they could get there one time when they're vulnerable, they would unalive everything in sight. Why? Because it was the right thing to do by women and children? No. They would do it to send a signal to the British that we're resisting your occupation. You're not going to be safe here so long as you're subjecting us to your dominance and your exploitation. That's a normal human response. So if you want to call the Americans, if you're going to be consistent, you have to say that the Americans should never have been allowed to do any of these rogue guerrilla tactics or T tactics, because that's off limits. Or you have to be consistent and say, because another people is occupied and oppressed, that they have a right to. You can't have it both ways, right? You got to be fair. Now, do you condemn the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising? Another situation where a bunch of people were being horribly oppressed, Jewish people, under the Third Reich and the Mustache Group. It was horrific what they were doing. They were taking people out of their homes, stealing their stuff, shoving them into these terrible ghetto living situations. And some of the more militant Jewish people said, F this, let's at least try to fight back, right? I say fair. Fair enough, as you should. Now, if you say condemn the H group for 10-7, you have to condemn the American patriots as well as the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising to be morally and intellectually consistent. I'm sorry to say it that way, but you can't have it both ways. You're either on the side of occupation and oppression, or you're on the side of resistance and liberation. You can't have it both ways. You can't, when it benefits your team, you can't be for occupation and oppression. And when it benefits your side to be liberators, you can't then say, well, no, it's different this time, right? So I know it took a while to explain all that. Let me get to the next guest. Did you already talk Ketonic? I think you did, didn't you?
How are you?
Did I miss that?
Chip,
Did
how
talk
are you?
already?
No,
I'm
no,
okay.
I didn't, Chip. I didn't.
Okay, come on up, please.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Chip, you remember I was once on your platform. I am in Australia now. It's 7 o'clock. In 1 hour, I have to be in my office. But
Okay.
as you know, or if you remember, I'm originally from North Lebanon. I came now for one topic, but since I heard what I heard, I would like to add something. First, I saw your video about the donation to Egypt. You remember
Okay.
you had a video about donation. You're gonna
I
send donation,
remember
or
forever. My memory's not that bad yet, but give me time. Yeah, I
yeah,
remember.
a lady who manufactured clothing or whatever.
Yeah,
You remember?
I know my own videos. Please continue.
Yeah, just be careful with that, because sometimes the donation is not going to the right place. So this,
I know.
I just want to bring your attention to this. Number two,
hold on. I got to say something to that. Okay, listen. The only time I've ever asked for any third party money up to this point, I've been at this for 3.5 months. I appreciate the suggestion, but just to let you know, as a business guy and as a lifelong, smart person, I took my time to painstakingly vet that organization through multiple people. So I wouldn't put it up there unless I'd done that painstaking work. Now, can I guarantee to the extent of perfection that stuff's getting where they say it is? I guess I can't tell you for sure, but I got 5 different people that corroborated what they say from different sources. Okay, that's what I did.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I know your intention. I just said be careful because I had a very bad experience. That's all. It's okay.
Listen, I just told you what I did to verify it. Okay, now that's being very thorough. It's still possible it could be a scam, I guess, but repeatedly telling me to be careful, I told you what I did to avoid being scammed. So if you think that's insufficient, give me more advice as to what you think I should do, and I'll take it down until I do those things. But I got your point. Yeah, I turned off. You're free to use your mic. I think it lets you do it. Anyway, you said you're from Lebanon and you wanted to talk about something else that we were talking about.
This is the topic I came for. I just want to tell you this, but I overheard about the 7th of October. Really enough is enough because nobody can insult people intelligence anymore. And if the Israeli have any evidence about 7th of October, bad things happened, they could have taken it to the Hague during the court that took place last week. So they have zero evidence. They keep coming up with these stories. We saw them in Lebanon. I fought them myself. If you remember, I told you I was fighting with the resistance in the 80s. When they commit Sabra and Shatila massacre, they blame it on some Lebanese agents who was working with them. They bombed Cana. They bombed the United Nations headquarters where civilians were hiding, and they blamed the United Nations. I am sure in a while they're going to blame God for everything. So just enough is enough of insulting people intelligence, because the story is coming out in the open and people are smarter. They have an open brain, open mind, and they know everything going on. So just enough is enough. What they're doing is they are harming their own people. Their own people is paying the price of living like blind and believing this terrible, silly Tom and Jerry stories that doesn't fit. You were in the army yourself. I was in the military. I fought the occupation of Israel in my South Lebanon, and we know how they work. There is a Druze religion in Lebanon, as you know, with the Israeli army. There is some Druze who live in Israel who was fighting with the Israeli army. So what they were doing in Lebanon, what they used to do, they used to shoot some Christian phalangists, or the Lebanese force used to call, and blame it on the Druze so they can fight each other. They have a long history of lies and the manipulation and for coming up with the stories. Maybe it works before, but now the world is awake. It cannot work anymore. What they have to do now is respect themselves, be a little bit genuine, because I know they cannot be genuine anymore, because their story and their lies and genocide, it's coming out to the open to the whole world. So enough is enough. Enough is enough of lying and insulting people intelligence. That's all what I want to say. On 7th of October, it was a few hours military operation. The Hatch group did in a few hours. They were running all the way from Gaza to 60 kilometers. They were running to pick up some hostage. Definitely, they did the mistake of picking up some older women or maybe kids. That was a mistake because so many people run after, with them. But they didn't have enough time to unzip their pants, for God's sake, you know, and they keep
Yeah, I
coming up with
understand.
these stories. You know,
Okay.
look, if they
You
have
know,
one evidence they could have taken to the Hague when they went to
yeah,
defend themselves.
clear enough.
Anyway,
Thank
have a
you
nice
for
day,
saying that.
Chip. Thank you so much. You take
Thank
care, my
you.
dear.
Thank you very much. You too. Yeah. Real quickly before we bring up the next guest, first of all, if you don't mind tapping on my face to get the likes up, I guess that's important. I don't know much about how that works, but and then the other thing I want to mention was I have a special guest that's coming on during my evening program this coming Wednesday. So if you can make that, it's great. It's an independent candidate for U.S. Senate in the state of New York, and I almost never promote any political people. If you know, I'm very critical of the U.S. political system, but anytime you can get a really good person in where they actually have a chance to win, I'm all for that. And I think this person has a real chance. But she needs help. She needs more attention, more name recognition. But her name is Diane Sayre, and she's an independent. I think she's a kind person. She wants to help people, and she knows a lot about stuff. I mean, every time I've listened to her speak, I'm like, wow, this person, everything. I've never heard them say one thing that's inaccurate, and they've raised a lot of things that most people just don't know, which I've been very impressed of. Anyway, you can look her up. It's spelled S-A-R-E, Diane Sayre, and she's running for the seat that Kirsten Gillibrand has. And of course, Chuck Schumer is the other guy that's there. Bad people. Anyway, so please come and check it out. Diane will be able to, share with you her story, and she's an interesting person. But her heart and her head are in all the right places, in my opinion. Secondly, I want to mention my schedule so you know when to come back. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So tomorrow night, I'll be here at 8 p.m. I usually go from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern time here on TikTok. And then Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, just like today, 12 noon, usually to 2 p.m., sometimes longer if I can do it. Today, we're running more than an hour over. I'm going to let these last 4 guests talk, and then I have to cut off the live at some point because got other stuff I got to do. So, but I just want to let those, if you're new here and you're just catching up, my name's Chip Barnes. I'm an Army veteran. I'm 56 years old. I live on the East Coast of the United States. I study geopolitics. I got on TikTok about 3.5 months ago, just before what happened on 10/7. So still in my rookie year doing this stuff. So I'm just trying to take it as it comes. People seem to like my style, which is one of trying to be objective as I can, be polite, listen to people, don't interrupt them, and try to do the same with the panels. So I do make a lot of videos. There's one that I did on these exact issues about, the veracity of Israeli, the media and what they say and their witnesses and stuff, which is the only reason why I push back, because I have no reason to doubt the people's sincerity except for the previous activities that said one thing, it turns out another thing happened. And that's just normal, to be dubious, right? So if anything did bad happen to women, like those things like assaults, it's horrific. I'm definitely against that. But as the previous person said, did they really have time to go through those things? I don't know. We may never know the real truth about some of that stuff anyway. So we'll see. Anyway, and I just want to say one more thing, and that is there's somebody, I'm trying to learn how to trade. And so there's somebody that I ran into recently. I'm going to be introducing him soon. I think you'll like him. He's very good at what he does. I'm going to give it a little more time to see how we work well together. But anyway, he's got a great organization on. He's got a very small but growing trading company. I'll talk more about that. So anyway, and it may not work out. It may not be something I promote if it doesn't work out. If it doesn't work, I don't want to tell you about it. But if it does work, it'll be a huge help to me because I'm doing this full time with no income. Okay. Anyway, let's get the last few guests in here and let's stop me yapping.
Hello, how are you doing, Mr.
Good, thanks.
Hey, I just want to let you know that you're awesome. Once again, I love listening to how you have the patience for a lot of different conversations. And I think that is really intriguing to be able to understand different people's point of views. And that in itself is an act of worship that many can't have the patience to have. So I just want to applaud you on that and give you a couple of likes. And thank you for allowing Americans, like you said in earlier times, we're kind of like resisting people or forces. And I just want to let you know that, as the beginning of Islam started, it was kind of the same deal there in Mecca. And there were a lot of people who were resistant forces, and there were a lot of people who were undercover, and there were a lot of people who were afraid to say that they believed just because of the persecution and the hate and the misjudgment and that they would definitely have. And I just want to bring up the point that, the guy earlier that was on your live spoke about how women were raped and
just to let you know, we have to use euphemisms like graped or H group. And by the way, just to let you know, if anybody's moderating, please don't kick anybody out or mute them unless they're really going overboard. I think somebody here said something like, sure, Chip, you don't really care about women. It said stand with Israel. I don't mind somebody saying that. That's fair, because maybe they don't believe I do. And then I have a chance to respond to it. So if you're moderating, just please don't kick people out too quickly. That's not how I want to operate. Sorry for jumping in on you there.
No problem. Hey, I just wanted to mention the fact that, you know, he did say that these things happened. And I do want to let you know that as Muslims, we go by what our prophet and messenger, may peace be upon him, told us about the rules of war. And he happens to be not only a commander in war, but he also happens to be like a Buddha and Alexander the Great at one, like into one person. Why? Because the character and the mannerism that he had for wars. So the rules for war is you can't even burn trees down. You can't touch the elderly. You can't touch. You can't touch babies. You can't touch anything of that nature that will make it hard in any way to make a hard living on somebody that did not attack you. So Hamas did, I want to let you know that the recipe for disaster is happened before. I don't even believe that Hamas is actually for the Palestinian people.
Okay, if I have to stop one more time, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to let you down, which I don't want to do. We have to use euphemisms on TikTok. They have an AI system that scans the language used in certain lives, and if they hear enough instances of certain words, they take down the live, and then I get a strike, and then my account gets banned, and nobody wins. So you're gonna have to refer to things like G-side, unalived, H group. You can call it Izzy. You know, just the more things we do that hits the button, we're gonna get taken down. Okay, I don't want to have to ask you again.
Oh, okay. I was just clarifying. I do apologize. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I tend to be, and I do apologize, man. And
No, it's okay. I just want to make sure we're clear. That's all.
Okay, well, you do, like I was just stating the fact that you know, we as you know, Muslims, we don't commend any kind of hate towards anybody else, even if it was a wasp, even if it was a cat, even if it was a dog, even if it was a fish. You cannot hurt anything that Allah gave life, because He is the same one who gave us life. And the reason that I hate what the H side did is because it made it look like as if we commend that, and we don't respect that, and that is horrible. And no way, shape, or form you're supposed to go into somebody's house. You're not supposed to touch nobody. You're not supposed to. Why? Because they did nothing to you. Anybody that does something to you, yeah, but they did nothing to you, so that is not respectable. That is not right. That we do not love like that. What kind of safety message does it send of us as people if that's something that we want to show as, you know, that's not right. I don't think that, like, what kind of peace or what kind of, you know, solution. I was mentioning that I do have a solution, and I want to speak about the solution just so you could give it thought. And you don't have to necessarily believe it or think that it's the best.
It's okay. What are your thoughts?
My solution is the only way to get this trauma away from the kids who have seen the bombardments for 100 days straight is to allow them to make one pilgrimage to Mecca. Allow them to make the pillar of faith that every single Muslim is supposed to make. Allow them to understand why it is that we go as people from all over the world, because Allah made it permissible, and Allah made it possible, and Allah made it something that we should do as a nation and as a world. Otherwise, He wouldn't have made it one of the pillar itself to become.
Well, not to cut you off again, I apologize. People in the comments are pointing out that not everyone who's Palestinian practices Islam. So to suggest that everybody go to Mecca, let's be honest, most people are not allowed out of Gaza at all, right? So that's impractical. It's just not going to happen until something major changes on everything. And, you know, I don't know how practical it is. I have no reason to negate your feelings about that in your heart. You seem very sincere. I don't know, because I have a hard time getting my head around any of the Abrahamic religions. That's just my skeptic nature coming out. So I don't know whether that would or would not have the cleansing outcome that you would hope it would have to cleanse the trauma of children and others who have been through this horror show. So with that, I think you've made your point, which I appreciate. We do have to kind of wind things up, and I'm sorry because we're already at the 3 hour and 15-minute mark when I was supposed to stop at 2. But I appreciate your point of view. Thanks for supporting me and being here. Come on again next time and we can talk some more. I'll be on tomorrow night at 8 p.m. if you can make it Eastern time. Thank you very much. Okay, we have Live and Let Live as a guest. Then we have Shaquille and then James Dean. Thank you, by the way, for being patient, Shaquille and James Dean.
Hi, Chip.
Hi.
This may be off topic, but I see a lot of comments about religion, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. A couple of days ago, I was trying to get on your live, but I grew up in a very high demand religion for 40 years, and I believed it with all my heart. I believed it to my core. I spoke in my church. I taught the youth groups. I absolutely 100% believed it was real. In 2020, when things started going on with COVID and Black Lives Matters, I decided to start researching the historicity of, what I was taught, and found out that what I was taught was not true, and it killed me, crushed me. And so my point
Would you mind clarifying what it was that turned out to not be true? Or you don't have to share that, but I'm just curious what you mean.
Yeah, well, all of it, pretty much. And I don't want to disrespect anyone's religion. I grew up Mormon, and I loved it. And I love the people, wonderful people. There's still. But the point of all this, is deconstruction to me on everything right now is key. I feel like I grew up in a bubble. I grew up in many bubbles, but the first bubble was my religion. I was taught it was the one and only true religion. I was taught that it solidified in my worth that I was better than everyone else. We were the elite. It was a us versus them doctrine. And I know that I'll have a lot of LDS friends who will say that's not true. Jesus teaches love everyone. But it absolutely is an us versus them doctrine. And what I'm finding after deconstructing my own religion, and in summary, what I found was just doing a little digging, honestly, and reading other history books. But you grow up in a bubble and they tell you what to believe. They spoon feed you your identity, your worth, your place in the world, how you view the world. They basically hand you a lens and say, this is your reality. And my point is, if you understand that somebody has a motive for teaching you what they're teaching you, and as an adult, it's our job, it's our responsibility as a human being, especially with what's going on in the world, to just sit back for a minute and go, can I deconstruct this belief that I was taught? I'm going to deconstruct it, and I'm going to do my own research, right? Because all the people I loved and I trusted told me it was true, told me it was real. Now I'm a mom, right? I have a responsibility to my children. I have a responsibility to teach them equality, to teach them love, to teach them kindness. So it's important for me to look at what I've been taught and find out what's true and what's not, right? So I'm not giving my children something that's false. I deconstructed. It shattered into a million pieces. I've kept the pieces that are good for me, that work for me. I no longer believe in Jesus as a savior, but I still love his teachings of standing with the marginalized, speaking truth to power. He was a good man, a good prophet. But when you believe something so strong and you are not willing to open your mind to anything else, that tells you that you have been taught to keep your critical thinking skills as an infant. Does that make sense? We don't want you to have critical thinking skills. We will tell you what to believe. We will tell you what your worth is. We will tell you what the truth is. And the problem with that is when we get so stuck in our comfort zone and we know it's true, right? We felt it, we know it, we believe it. So we're not willing to do the work. My message is we have to do the work. I deconstructed my religion. And then now I'm deconstructing my government. I had no idea, right? Again, a bubble within a bubble and a bubble religion. And now I'm in a bubble of America as the beacon of hope, the beacon of, the light on the hill of humanity, equality, democracy. I'm sorry to get choked up, but I thought that we were different. I thought we cared. I know I probably, and I've said this to myself many times, what an ignorant, you were comfortable in your privilege. And so you didn't do the work. You didn't do the work to find out who we were harming, what our agenda was. I had no clue. And now I'm reading the 100 Years of War of Palestine. I'm watching the documentaries. I'm listening to the lives.
Yeah.
I'm older, so I'm new on TikTok. This is my first live, so I apologize for my emotion.
No, it's
I
okay.
get scared to speak. But the things I have learned is that even if you love something, you might not know, it might not be what you thought it was. And it's okay to question your beliefs. It's okay to say, you know what, maybe my government isn't doing what's right. Maybe they're wrong. And until we are able to open our hearts and our minds and allow the cognitive dissonance to come, look at it and go, okay, this doesn't line up with what I thought it was. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to question. And then I think the power comes because then you allow yourself to stop relinquishing your power to someone else. I relinquished my power to the elders of my church. It was always you listen to the priesthood. They will tell you what to do. They will tell you what's right. You listen to them. And by the way, we believe in personal revelation, but if you get personal revelation that doesn't align with what your leaders say, then you're wrong. So what this does, when you allow yourself to deconstruct, you finally get to tune into your own power, your own inner knowing. You can listen to your own heart, regardless of whose land is whose, right? Who was there first? Was it the Palestinians? Was it, the Jewish people? Who was there first? All of that doesn't matter if you can start listening to your heart. If we can unite as human beings and say, we all matter. These kids matter, right? They matter. Their little families.
Okay. I understand your emotional depth of this, and I appreciate your point of view. And thanks for sharing your backstory. We're so far down the line on this. I'd love to hear more on the next program if you want to come back and contribute more of your experience. But yeah, going through that deconstruction can be very painful. I hear you on that. Thank you for coming up. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chip.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, let's take this a step further, and I'll be quick because obviously I want to get moving too. This is what hit me. I got hit by the same feelings that she expressed there, and I felt the same way. And it's a big emotional gut punch, right? So first of all, when you learn about all the stuff your government's telling you is hogwash, right? And I learned what happened with the Israel-Palestine thing in 1989. That completely shook that viewpoint up. And the more that I've looked at everything, the more I dig, the more I look, the more, sort of, I guess you call it, the more jaded you get. You start to realize it's all a big story. And really it comes down to power, control, and money. Everything seems to be driven from those, which is human greed, right? It's the worst of the human qualities. And we're programmable. We can be loving and caring, we can be altruistic, or we can be selfish and greedy and, harm other people, right? And that seems to be the tendency of the leadership of a lot of these ancient and current societies, which is really a shame. But it goes much deeper than that. And this is the part that, she mentioned the air of superiority. both within groups of people ethnically as well as religiously. And that's real. And that's also unfortunate because it's not true, obviously. It's just a point of view that's warped by leadership that train people to think that way. I would argue there's groups of people on both sides of this issue in Israel-Palestine that do some of that. I think more in Israel. I think the system that gears them towards thinking less about Arab people or Muslims or whatever is much more pervasive, although maybe more subtle, but it's more pervasive than that which is indoctrinated in Palestinian schools that is often alleged. But it goes deeper than that. And this is the part that most of us are, again, just like you want to deconstruct what happened in your religious experience, deconstructing other parts of the human experience is equally difficult, if not harder. And what do I mean by that? Well, we're taught as humans from birth. What are we taught about ourselves in general? Are we third on the list as far as species go? Are we 27th? No, we're number one, right? Humans are it. We're the special species. We're the divinely created thing. Not that I want to disparage your religion, but it's awfully convenient that we're it, right? But if you really step back and strip away the stories, right? Especially like the stories about the religion and how you're better than the other, we're no different than any other biological animal if you really strip away the story. And I know that really upsets some people to hear that because they're like, no, we're made in the image of God and we're the, no, we're not. Now, I don't know how everything started. And like I say, if you listen to me long enough, I'm going to piss some people off. Okay, there you go. But the point I'm trying to make is that the stories that we tell ourselves, both in society, in religion, in ethnicities, and even with our species, are all stories. They're human constructs used to justify either behavior or understanding of mysteries that can't be explained. We don't know what's going to happen when we die. We don't know what happened of how the hell things got here. A lot of times we don't understand why things are the way they are in the world. So different things can help explain that. And these stories are what makes that up. But I like to say biophysical reality is what I believe in. So I can look outside and I can see a tree. I can see the sun. I can see the mountain. I can see the stream. Therefore, I believe in those things. And that's where my mind goes. And maybe I'm missing a whole lot. I probably am. And I wish I could go there because the skeptic within me won't let me. I could lie to people and just go along with the game. But, I've been deconstructing this for most of my adult life. And when it gets right down to it, everything's part of. And we have to learn, if we're going to survive, how to be part of. This era of superiority doesn't work well in any of these circumstances, right? Eventually it comes tumbling down because of the arrogance and all the worst qualities it brings out in us. And the reason why industrialization is screwing up the biosphere is because of that arrogance that we deserve to have what we want in the short term, everything else be damned. And that's the way it is. And none of us are at fault, but all of us are complicit to some degree, as am I. I'm talking to you on a smartphone, for example, in a nice, comfortable chair, in a place that's got, heat and hot water and electricity, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that's a quick aside. Let's get the next person up, which is Shaquille. Thanks for waiting. I had to say that. Sorry, I didn't want to have to say that.
Hey, how you doing, Chip? Great to be here as usual. By the way, before I start, let's push this to 200,000 likes on there before we finish, because we can do it in 5 or 10 minutes very, very easily. I think since the time I've been watching, I think I've done about maybe 3,000 likes. And it takes literally 30 seconds to tap rapid fire. Rapid fire, you can do 150 likes in 30 seconds. Earlier on, I did 1,100 in one go. So get going, guys, because this counters the algorithm that is Zionist skewed. Okay, so let's help this out. You know what? It's a shame that the apartheid lover has gone now, because I would have taught him a whole new rear entrance with his lies and his obfuscation. And the worst thing is they speak with such eloquence and such gentle manner, because this is all part of their new training. In the early days, and I've been debating these rats for decades, they used to be very, very aggressive.
Hold on. Listen, I am as much against the arguments and of the mindset of most people who promote Zionism, but I don't call them rats, and I don't think you should either, okay? You can call them, scheming. You can say that they're dishonest, disingenuous, but let's not compare them to creatures with which most people look down upon. I think that's not okay. And I like rats, by the way. I'm a fan of rats. If you don't know rats, you should
I'm
spend
just,
some time with them.
yeah, no, they're all humans, but it's just their behaviors. And, you know, one of the things that really people need to start looking at and do some independent investigation. I highly, highly encourage it. They talk about the number of expulsions, and I think it's over 1,000 expulsions in the last 109 years. Okay. Now, I've never heard of any group, and as a Muslim, we are the most oppressed group on the planet right now. Okay, but we don't all go singing and dancing about Islamophobia. It happens. We deal with it. Okay, now I'm same age as you, Skip. Sorry, Chip. I'm same age as you. Okay, when I was a kid, and when I was a teenager, when I went into the military, nobody ever abused me for my religion. I got called names because of my skin color. That was it. Nobody said a word about my religion. It was irrelevant. The brainwashing against Muslims started happening about 30 years ago, 25 to 30 years ago, when it became very, very convenient. And when the demands by Bibi Milakowski, that's his real name, not Netanyahu. He's a Polish man. Okay, when his demands in the lobby were lobbying and paying American politicians to vote their way to take out their enemies, all of a sudden Muslims became enemy number one. And so all the movies were brainwashing people, all the language that was used in the media. Because I'm telling you, as a kid, nobody ever abused me for my religion. Okay, because it doesn't matter to anybody. Nobody in history is abused and oppressed purely for their religion. And that's a fact. People get abused, and if they're repeatedly abused, it's because of their actions. So what you have to do is you have to do some independent investigation and find out if somebody is it the rest of the world is wrong, or is it something that they've said and done, and is it their behaviors that is causing a backlash? Just like the behavior of the H group hasn't been appreciated by the occupier and by the oppressor. Okay, they think that it just came out of thin air, like like this just happened from nowhere. Oh my God, you know, how dare our victims fight back and break free from their cage?
It's like we're coming up on 1 more minute. Give you that heads up. 1 more minute.
Sorry. Yeah. How dare our victims break free from their cage and attack us? And he's still pushing all the lies about the SA against women. I mean, none of it. I mean, even the Zionist police force has said we haven't got a single complaint. They've not received a single complaint. There isn't a single complaint, and all this video footage that they keep referring to. If it was so evidentiary that it's real, believe me, they'd put it out. I've seen, nobody ever stopped the atrocity videos of Al-Qaeda and ISIS and all these others. Okay, I saw the most horrific things that would make you scream if you saw it and give you nightmares. Nobody stopped that. They put that out. Why? Because that's what you do to terrorize people. If it's so horrific, believe me, the Zionists would be leveraging it. The fact that they have private audiences makes you question who filmed it, how was it put together. We know that this group of people are the most prolific filmmakers. They're the best with special effects.
5 or 10 seconds. We got to finish up. I got another guest. I got to close out. Sorry.
So just to say, they're the best at filmmaking. I mean, you know, they're very successful in the movie making industry and special effects and making you believe that you're watching something on Mars or on the moon. So just be mindful of what people claim that they've seen on a video is not necessarily what they say. Thank you.
Fair enough. Good point. Thanks a lot. Thanks for coming on. Please come back tomorrow night. I mean, I may even do one during the day tomorrow to catch people up because we've had a lot of demand. Really quickly, for those of you who don't know, my name is Chip Barnes. Geopolitics is sort of my shtick. Try to stay down the middle, be polite, give people a chance to talk, listen, and go as long as we need to get everybody get their opinion in. I don't always do everything right. I don't get everything right, and if I don't, I'm willing to correct it because, you know, that's the right thing to do, right? But I am staunchly on the side of the oppressed. And I think in this case, it's clear who the oppressed is, right? So, and I'm very critical of people who are the oppressor. In this case, it happens to be the Israeli government and their military and their police forces. And also I'm critical of those who support what they do. And some of them don't know, many do, and they still support them because they have a bigger tie to the people. And I understand that, but I don't agree with it. So I think it's fair to criticize that. I don't criticize Jewish people. I don't criticize everybody who lives in Israel. I think that's absurd. And I really commend people who are Jewish around the world who see what many of us have come to learn, and they're also critical. I give them a big thumbs up, right? It takes a lot of courage to do that. So anyway, I have a link tree in my bio. It's very simple. It just says Linktree Chip Barnes. If you want to find me elsewhere, these are all recorded. And then I upload them right after I finish the session to my YouTube channel and my Rumble channel. So if you came in late or if you had to leave early or whatever the case may be, you can always check it out. And they're posted in their entirety, no editing, no nothing. You know, I do these things with no agenda. I just kind of go with the flow and it takes us where we go. And I kind of enjoy it that way. So if it's your first time here, please follow me. I appreciate that. I think you'll find that my style is one that's a little easier to listen to than some of these chaotic Jerry Springer-like things where everybody's yelling at each other. That doesn't exist here. And if it does, people start to behave like that, they hit the road, right? Which is fair. Okay, there's one more thing I want to mention before we go back to our last guest. I appreciate you, everybody waiting, being very patient. James Dean has been very patient, so I'm going to give James some time. And that is, at the very top of my link tree, the one I just mentioned, I've placed a fundraiser for a clothing garment maker who's in Egypt, who's getting clothing for people in Gaza who need it for winter and other garments. I took painstaking amounts of time to make sure it was legit. Okay, I took 2 full weeks to make sure. So, and many of them didn't even know what I was doing to make sure of it. So I did, and I got the okay, so now it's there. I've made a donation. I hope you'll consider it. This person's doing the work at their cost. So they're not profiting at all, and they have a good heart, and they're sending the stuff, and some of it has made it in, which is great news. So I don't know what it's like for you, but if it's like 40 degrees outside and all you have is a t-shirt, it's pretty miserable, right? So to give people like new underwear, I was in the military. You spent 6 weeks sometimes wearing the same clothing in the military. It's disgusting. Okay, so if you can help out with that, great. If, and if you want to help me out, I have some links at the bottom, but I'd rather have you give to that charity than give to me, at least at this point, for the people who need it, right? Okay, so in the middle of my link tree, there's some groups you can participate in, different Telegram groups. One's called Palestine in Focus. It's got a lot of great people communicating and sharing information, videos, pictures, etc. There's one in there that's called Action for Change. We talk a lot of systemic level stuff, right? That's what that's for, if you want to do that. And there's some others. It's self-explanatory. You'll see it. And then the rest of my social media, that's for that. Okay, let's get to our last guest, James Dean. Thanks for being patient. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate that. I wanted to say, even though it's maybe well-meaning from some people who are on the pro-Pali side, this issue is not religious. You have a population that is saying that our ancestors potentially, or even vicariously, used to live in an area over a millennium ago, and now we've come back to take it. And we're going to have superseding rights over the group that's there now. That's really the main issue here. Maybe religion is now used to maybe promote some of the movements of Zionism, but I think it's important to remember Zionism is not a left wing or right wing or a religious or a non-religious. It encompasses all of that. And I think that's kind of like something that I would like just the chat to know. It's like, it's not really just a right-wing thing, although it can be, and even in a more worse way sometimes. But, there is a lot of left-wing so-called progressives in Israel that still support many of the policies that Israel's continuing to do, promoting Aliyah, Jewish-only settlements in the West Bank. And I was hoping that guy, I think his last name was Silver, you were debating, you brought up some good points that I wanted to also maybe mention if he was still on here, that, Israel's history is very deceptive. And even recently with October 7th, they've fumbled that, right? I mean, they've they've lied about the 40 unheaded. children. They had that Al Shifa hospital fake nurse. They had even on Fox News a guy that, I don't know if you, maybe I brought this up before I came on. There was a guy on Fox News, and he was viewing a guy that was supposedly an H member in his underwear. And then like moments later, the camera quickly pans to him putting back his like uniform on. I don't know if you saw that one. So it's just so much deception. It's like you really, as you've said before he like logged off from your live, like you can't, how are you going to trust like that side anymore? You know, the other side, even when the numbers are supposedly questioned by Israel, the H group in previous attacks prior to October 7th, they've been consistent with the amount of unalived people. So it's not, excuse me. Yeah. So it's not, it's silly to believe that, you know, they're lying about, you know, the amount of people that have unalived. In fact, it's probably even more, you know, because now there isn't nobody really investigating the amount of people that are under a lot of the rubble, right? So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, I agree with you. It's like the boy who cried wolf. We've heard that old story where the kid was supposed to be guarding the sheep. He's on the edge of town. He says, "Wolf!" Everybody comes running out. There's no wolf. They go back inside. Does it again for kicks and grins. Everybody comes running out. They go back inside. Third time, okay. And like the fifth time he does it, nobody comes outside. And that's exactly the same thing that's happened. Trust us, please trust us. We're telling that. How do we know? You've lied the first 15,000 times. How can it be right this time?
no, 100%. Yeah, it's definitely a form of, you know, Jewish supremacy that's really being exercised on the Palestinian people for way too long. And thankfully now with avenues like this and TikTok and people like yourself, we're able to, you know, see the truth now.
Yeah, at least as much as we can get through social media, right? There's still stuff that's still hidden from us. We don't know. We don't even know what we don't even know, but hopefully eventually it'll come out. So thanks for those points, and thank you for being so patient. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you can come back on a subsequent live and spend a little more time. I know you waited a long time to say those things. So thank you for doing it.
No, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you very much. Yeah, you know, unfortunately, sometimes I like to take people on sooner. I try to go in order and be fair. Sometimes I'll probably have an open conversation where people can get a little more back and forth because that can be fun, but it can get out of control quickly, right? That can be kind of crazy. So anyway, for those of you who don't know, I mean, I have a big library of videos in my main library covering all sorts of subjects going back until early October. So I talk about global politics. I talk about the ownership class. I talk about the U.S. political system. I talk about propaganda. I talk about this conflict. I talk about a lot of stuff. Even Ukraine, Russia, going back to those conversations. If you go to my YouTube channel or my Rumble channel, the longer form content, I got a bunch of videos that I've put up before I started doing this, just me walking in the woods, talking and stuff like that. So my stuff is very, very, very unpolished, okay? And maybe that's something that's likable. I'm a walk and talk kind of person. I don't have all these fancy 4K setups and all this other stuff. Maybe I'll get to that point, but that takes a lot of work and a lot of money to set all this. I don't, you know, that's just not me yet, but I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to fix stuff up. So if you do go to my link in bio, which is my link tree, you'll find my Twitter feed. It's got a great list of people who I follow on there. If you want to check that out, I really highly recommend that. It's got a bunch of YouTube channels. For those of you who run into somebody who's ignorant, just want to share a couple of resources with you. I'm going to add these to my link tree. It's going to say valuable resources for Zios. There's one called Life in Occupied Palestine, which was a young Jewish woman named Anna Baltzer. She went to visit Ramallah based on some friends that were telling her stuff like we talk about here, and she didn't believe them. She thought they were propagandized and were brainwashed by Palestinians. And then when she went and lived there for 6 months, she was like, oh shit, you know, she learned all the stuff that we've come to know. And so she made a documentary about it, which I thought was very brave of her, right? And other people, like people who speak out who are Jewish. I mean, I tip my cap to them. It's got to be hard for them and their families, right? Anyway, and then there's another great one for Gaza called Gaza Fights for Freedom. Gaza Fights for Freedom by Abby Martin. So I think you'll like that. And if you're somebody who wants to hear the whole history, if they really don't know what's going on from the beginning, have them watch a great documentary called Al-Nakba, like A-L Nakba, N-A-K-B, Al-Nakba. And I think you'll find that very interesting as well. Again, it's amazing. The more you watch these things, you learn stuff that you didn't remember. You're like, oh, I remember that now. That's horrible. And, it would take us an hour or maybe an hour and a half to go through just the dastardly things that Israel does to Palestinians in the West Bank and occupied East Jerusalem. Maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours. And that's just to list them one after the other after the other. I wish it weren't the case. I think that Israel could maintain their security, if that was their objective, without doing 90% of what they do. I always it's like putting the finger in somebody's wound. It's like, it's bad enough you've wounded them. Why do you keep poking them in the wound? You don't have to do that. But they do it because they can. And a lot of times it's out of sight, out of mind. The only good thing that's come out of this, in my opinion, is that more people see it and they're actually seeing what the Israelis do, not what they say they do. And therefore, it's destroying their narrative. Their reputation is completely shot internationally. We're seeing what's happening with the International Court of Justice, which is, I think, very much appropriate. And although it may not have teeth in terms of actually getting the people who should be in jail into jail, it'll be a permanent mark on their record for life that'll never go away. And it may start the impetus for greater international action that may break the logjam that we see. So maybe there's some hope there. So fingers crossed, these people, if anybody deserves a break, it's the Palestinian people. They've been through so much and they're continuing to go through so much. But let's do what we can, spread good information like we're doing here. Let's have the courage to invite people to lives like this and Eric's and SoCal Smitty's, just gather somebody and say, hey, you need to get on TikTok, start watching these people. That's how we're going to win the battle long term. That's the only way, right? It's an information war as much as it is the physical war. So I appreciate you being here. I really do. The next time I'm on live again is tomorrow night, which is Friday from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. here on TikTok. That's my normal schedule on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturdays, I go live from 12 noon, normally to 2 p.m. Sometimes like this, that the train just keeps going down the tracks like it did today. And so there we are. But like I said, if you want to help me out, if you like my style, if you want to support my work, I'm not taking any money right now. I'm not making any money. So if you're someone who likes what I'm doing, give as little as like $5 a month to my Patreon. I'm going to be putting videos just for my Patreon subscribers, as well as giving early access to not only my regular videos, but all of the replays from these lives. This live is recorded right now by TikTok. I will then be putting it up onto YouTube and Rumble when we finish here today. It takes about a half an hour for it all to go up. So if you miss part of it, you want to catch it, you want to just watch it again, whatever. And I have them going back to December the 19th of this year. All of them are up in their entirety. I don't edit them. I don't go back and correct my mistakes. If I'm wrong, whatever it is, just goes out there, right? And I hope to take some of the issue-specific segments that were really good, whether it's a dialogue back and forth, an argument, a presentation about a certain issue where I just happen to get on a roll that worked out, clip those out and put them on my other channels like I talked about. But for now, I'm mostly just jabbering on TikTok on the lives and making quick videos and having a good time with it. And hopefully people enjoy it. So thank you for being here. For those of you who follow me, thank you so much. Please spread the word and let's keep talking this. May Palestine be free.